All right, good evening, everyone. Before we start our regular town council meeting later tonight, we're going to start with a work session here, for a discussion with the Economic Development Committee. I want to invite Brian Wagner to come on up, give a little introduction. He is the liaison to the committee.
Good evening, council members. As you indicated, this is the Economic Development Committee's annual meeting. Our new chair, Mike Gagas, will be running the show. We've basically asked them to do a quick review of things they've done over the last year, do a quick review of things they're interested in doing for the next year, and try and do everything in a brief enough time so that we can allow some engagement at the end of the discussion for you guys to go over anything they've said and also give them some direction on things you might like to see them undertake in the upcoming years ahead. So I'll turn it over to Mike Gagas. You can just use the button there.
Button on the right, Mike.
Got it. Super. So we put together a slide. It's a lot of eye candy. It's going to be great. There he is. Yeah. Okay. While Brian's firing it up, I just wanted to thank you guys for inviting us in. I think that was in response to many of the boards and committees wanting more interaction and more direction and feedback. So thank you for doing this. I'll get right to the agenda. Okay. You can go to the next slide, Brian. Okay, so just going to introduce the members of the EDC here so that you can know them all. And there's some folks that aren't here, but we're going to talk about three things basically. First, a proposal to look at the amount of commercial property that is available in this town and see whether there's opportunities to increase that, to increase the commercial tax base. I think it's important. We have been, Josh primarily, has been working on an economic dashboard that he saw from another location where he lived. And it's going to be, you're going to enjoy looking at it because it's taking a bunch of different factors that influence economic activity and putting them onto a dashboard that we hope to be able to produce on a regular basis. And you know, we're supposed to be giving you advice. Well, we can give you the information and then you can self-serve the advice a little bit. We'll outsource to you, but in addition to that, it will be something that we can determine whether or not what we're doing is having any impact on the economic vitality of the town. If it's not, then we have to change what we're doing, right, so that the numbers will go where we want them to go. And finally, we're going to talk about new ways of working. Again, as I started this meeting, it's a good way to get more communication, and we think we need to expand our communication to other boards and groups and different people in the community. So we're going to talk about that, and then we'll turn it over to you guys, and you can ask whatever you like. Okay. So. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Brian. Okay, so who do we have? We have Mr. Tom Rootliff over here. We have Randy Puzo. We have Susan Marcus. We have Brian Smith, Josh Gilman, myself. Henry Thayer is the vice chair. He's not here today. Ian Clark was the representative to the EDC from South County Hospital, but he's also a citizen, so he applied and you approved putting him on the board as well. And Andrew Holt is traveling on business. Ken Tetzner, who runs the Phil's, not here either. Okay, is not here either. Did I miss anybody, guys? Pardon? Oh, and then from URI, we do have a representative. Her name is Rebecca Carroll. She's the Assistant Director of Community Relations. She's under the Community and Legislative Relationship organization, and her boss and some other people from the foundation and so forth all met, and they all understand what she's trying to do, which is to be a nice conduit between us and them. Good, thank you, Susan. Okay, so what did we do in FY 2024? I think the big important thing that got done was that the Old Tower Hill Neighborhood Plan, Commercial Highway, whatever name you want to use, got off the ground. I understand it's about time for an interim report on that. You know, we were probably in favor of doing something a little more quick and dirty. You know, grab some zoning from somewhere else that we like and, you know, modify that. And Jamie pretty much insisted that we do this right, and we get a consultant, and we did. And, you know, right off the bat, it was really nice to see the community involvement. We know that whatever proposal you come up with, it's going to have a lot of support. And when somebody comes in crashing in and wants to do something else, the whole town is going to know, no, that's not what we intended. We wanted to do this. So we thought that was a great outcome. In addition, you know, the zoning would permit more housing, which is another big plus for us. We did establish the South County Hospital and the URI representation, and that's going to make it a lot easier. And we're going to try to work between meetings. We're going to go there, they're going to come here, and we'll try to make sure that we have good communication, because otherwise we're just kind of guessing. All right, we made a recommendation for the Wakefield Elementary School. I know there's an affordable housing, workforce housing initiative there. When Josh starts to speak, you're going to see how there's a lot of impact on business from a housing perspective, and so we're pretty, I think you find that what he's going to show you might be somewhat synergistic to the housing efforts. And I think it also is a complementary proposal, because it's a short term. What are you going to do in the next 1 to 2 years if you decided to go to affordable housing for that property? That's good too. And then finally, we had 300th anniversary contributors here who spent a lot of their time. Brian Smith is one of them, and Henry Thayer was the other. Of course, we had Joanne Esposito on our committee, and she resigned, so we felt like we gave to the office on the 300th year committee. And a young gentleman named Jack Cadman is applying to get on the EDC committee, and he was on the planning committee, so we want half credit for him too. Okay, so that's it in a nutshell. Let's go down. Next slide, please. Okay. Okay, so thinking back in history, you know, the South County Commons, as I understand it, was not overwhelmingly welcomed to the community, and it took a lot of struggle to finally get it off the ground. But it is standing in this moment as a big contributor to the budget or to the tax base of the town, and so we think it would be worthwhile to do a GIS survey of the town and try to identify any opportunities to increase the commercial property base in the town. Particularly if it's a mixed use kind of a thing would be terrific. The other thing that we'll consider in that study is making it, how can we make it more business friendly, easier to do business here in the town? So Joe Veely told me that 1% of the property in this town is commercial, commercially zoned, he would know. So I think it's a worthwhile initiative, and love to have your feedback on that. Next slide. Okay, Josh?
So hand it over to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, sir.
Great. Thank you again for the opportunity here. So the dashboard initiative, this is something that from previous life we presented to the town council to basically give an overview. Oh, I'm sorry. I can take this one. Sorry about that. All right. Is this better? Okay. Yeah, exactly. So long short is it's something that helps to drive a variety of different information sources into one source that we can provide from a committee to the town council to help with making decisions and to see more in the weeds, if you will, trends, actions that we're doing, and recommendations that we might have. Again, this would be something that could be provided to the council on a quarterly basis. It could be faster than that if there were specific actions that you wanted to see. But again, it's a great opportunity to kind of get that information up clear and in a centralized location. As we walk through this, I've got a couple example slides of what we provided in the past. This is by no means the only thing that we can provide, so we want input from the town on what would be valuable to you to help drive decisions and actions. So if you want to go to the next slide here. So again, you'll see over the next two slides that we put some information together. The committee went through a variety of different exercises to get to this. Again, we need to drive what you would like to see on this, if it's valuable to you, on a quarterly or monthly basis. The focus areas, real quick: housing, tax incentives, like Mike just talked about, education. We're trying to put in there some numbers behind our population, our unemployment rates, you can see there, and then kind of track those because I think that's important as we go through a couple of the other areas that Mike was talking about from a recommendation and action side, whether it's tax base or helping to be focused on workforce, housing for workforce individuals. It's also helpful, I think, here from a home ownership perspective, as we look to do different things or potentials with the surplus properties, on what we would have to help bring those dollar amounts down to make those type of homes affordable, or to be able to make them rentable for the base that we have here. All of these numbers are just not pie in the sky numbers. Inside the slides, I've referenced kind of where they're coming from, whether it's the census from the state or from the federal government. Next slide, please, Brian. So we're showing this as, again, another example, and this is specifically targeted from information from the state about the South County area, and more specifically about Washington County. So we're pulling through these up, and I think they're ones that you've probably seen over and over again. But I think that, again, coming around is helping to be focused on what we need, the demand for the workforce housing here. That the jobs that you have listed here, the fastest growing, the largest numbers, are needing the more affordable housing that we do not, unfortunately, have. So again, we want to be able to provide information to the town council. So if this is helpful, great, we can start carving it up or getting more details or specifics behind it. But again, just a couple of examples here. And I'm sorry, just to close out real quick, again, a couple of examples, a couple samples here, but we really need to get your input on if this is valuable, and then what you would want us to report on from an action side or information to help drive those decisions that you're trying to make. All right, happy to answer any questions at the end of our presentation.
Well, we're almost there. All right, so today we have one meeting a month. We're going to continue to have one meeting a month, but we don't get a lot done between meetings. We're going to get educated on the open meeting laws and regulations to make sure that we can do this in a good way. But we are going to have work streams going on all year. As I mentioned before, we're going to increase communication with the two largest employers in the town, with the Chamber of Commerce. Randy Apuzzo is going to be meeting with Joe at least once a month before our meetings, so that any input from him and any information we want to exchange happens. And we're going to take a look at the other boards to see where the synergy is, because maybe some members of our board need to be attending the other meetings, or at least looking at the recordings and so forth. Towards that end, we've already secured the permission from the University of Rhode Island and from South County Hospital to conduct an employee survey there. Of course, they have to see the survey first, but they're willing to pump it through their HR organization to see how far of a commute do people have that work there. What is their position there? What could increase the quality of working life in our town? And so that's going to be a pretty good-sized initiative. Hopefully we can find something that's already done, but we'll have to work on that and get it going. On top of that, we're going to try to keep tabs on what's going on around here. There's a lot of stuff happening. I read the Independent, and I learn something every day. And finally, the Providence Journal, Providence Business First, the State Planning Department puts a newsletter out. And the social media, if you want to know what's going on over at URI, if you want to know what's going on at South County Hospital, you go on LinkedIn, you go on X, and you'll learn a lot. So we're going to encourage that amongst our members and try to divide and conquer along those lines. That's about all we had to present. We're certainly welcome to entertain your questions.
Go ahead.
Are you trying to, or are you in communication with the people that own the old APC building to see if you guys can work with them to try to get industry in here? Because a lot of the jobs you showed were hotel, things, not really high-paying jobs. So I didn't know if you could look at a place like that and see if you guys could work together and maybe get something going there.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Thank you. It's the ATC. You're talking about
APC. The one on
what's it called again?
Fairgrounds Road. Correct. Yeah, the old
Schneider
Schneider
Electric
Electric.
building.
Fairgrounds Road.
Yeah, and there's a packaging company in there now, from my understanding, food packaging
Yeah. Okay.
company.
Good. Thank you, Greg.
All right, I want to talk a little about the dashboard. I really like that idea. I think that helps drive policy decisions. I think that gives us information as to what is the business culture out there at a certain given time. It allows us to sort of look at, all right, what is working, is going on the trend of being popular or working, what has potential path for success. I think that's great, and I love how that aligns with our interest in affordable housing and what occupations are in most of need that can live in the affordable housing that we are seeking to accomplish. So I really like everything you had on those slides. If you can give that to us quarterly, I think that would be great. The more frequent, the better, but quarterly seems to be very good in my mind. So if you guys can do that and compile all that data on a quarterly, I think that would be great for us.
Super.
So I had questions about where you're getting the data from.
Good question.
Yeah, and I'm sure we can share the slide. I'm sorry. I'm sure we can share the slides with you on the reference. It's 6 or 7 different sources that we're pulling from the Census Bureau to the state reports.
He noted them he notes them in the notes of the
PowerPoint
mentions them
presentation.
in the PowerPoint presentation, which we'll send you.
Okay.
So you can see the specifics, but you should understand that there's a lot of information at the state level. There's less at the county level. There's less here. So, digging down to get that, we're going to make some assumptions about how things work.
So that was my question, because I would think that the town has certain statistical information that comes to it as well. And I don't know if we, like the unemployment rate, how do we determine that? Do you just go to the Department of Labor and figure that out? How do you, like the real estate, obviously you can get from the realtor statistics type things. Are there any other data sources that are not public? Like these seem like public, you're using public data and just
Agreed.
pulling it together?
Agreed.
Okay.
Yes, all the reference I had was public, so we go back and research, but I'm happy to work with anybody who might have more information from a town level. And a lot of what we got from the state, or that's available from the state, are older. You know, they're 1.5 to 2 years old at this point. So if there's more up-to-date, fresh information, we're happy to work with whoever to help pull that together.
And then I had a question about the GIS survey. Can you talk a little bit about what you want to accomplish and how we would go about doing that?
Right. I understand. Okay. I'm sorry, Deb.
I wrote down the GIS survey of the town to identify areas of opportunity. So how do you see that happening? How would we go about doing that?
You would have to do some kind of a data analysis on the GIS system. I mean, you have maps in here that have the zoning by area and so forth, and we would be
Okay.
looking at that and looking at other opportunities to expand it. Next to the existing commercial might be a possibility, et cetera.
Right. So, because I think about, like, there may be 50 or 100 acres of land that is not developed that could be developed, but it might not have water, it might not have sewer, it might be in a beautiful country road, and then it creates, you solving one problem and creating another problem or another controversy. So I just didn't know how you saw, like, Joe is right. I think it's 98% of the town is zoned residential, 2% maybe commercial and industrial.
Yeah.
And then the other layer is a lot of that town land is either farm, forest, and open space, or open space protected. Yeah, which is about 30%.
30%, that's what I
So,
heard,
and then from our seat, I think we hear a lot of people, they like that, and so they don't want to change that. So we need to maximize that 1 to 2% in a way that gives us high value. And I think mixed use is the way to solve a couple problems at the same time.
Yeah, that's right. That's good, thank you. Yeah, it's,
So, yeah.
Yes, you could also look at how much of the commercial property is still not built on already, and what will it take to start a business here,
Yeah.
that kind of thing, to determine where you might look geographically.
And one last thing, if I could, is that URI does a transportation survey, which in the past has asked people how far they commute, where do they commute from. That information they may be able to share with you, aggregate data,
Yeah.
because I don't know how often they do it. They do it to assess parking and transportation on the campus, but it would be interesting to know. I mean, they clearly know the mailing addresses of their employees, but doesn't mean that they're living at that space anyway. But the transportation survey might be helpful to you in terms of,
Super.
because with all economic growth becomes traffic, and then people are, again, addressing speeding on 138, speeding on 108 and South Road. So
Yeah.
again, one good thing creates another controversy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mike, on your search for data for the GIS survey, I attended a meeting down at the Land Trust a couple of months ago. They may have a lot of that data that you're looking for. Part of their presentation, it seems to me, included what you're talking about.
Oh, that's great, thank you for that.
Sorry. If you're going to get that data from URI through their Human Resources Office, I'd be very curious to see that. That may provide a lot of valuable information for us. You might want to try the same thing with the hospital.
Yep.
I just wonder if they're going to provide, that is personal information. You're asking for people's home addresses and, their occupation and their title. I think,
Well,
No, that's not what I'm suggesting. It
but
seems
that's
to
what
me that
they had asked for. They want to work with HR to get.
no, we've envisioned doing a survey at the 2 largest employers, just because it can get a lot of employees there. We would also go to some of the local businesses as well, and the kinds of questions we would be asking, like, what town do you live in? How long is your commute?
Yeah.
What is your position, kind of things that would be sanitized and
Anonymous.
anonymous, but That's sort of the way we're envisioning to do it.
Okay.
I would
okay.
think just zip code and salary grade would be a mine of information.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so first, I want to thank you for your work and making it easier to do business in South Kingstown is something that is really important. One of the priorities to me is, of course, the two largest employers in the community. I am somewhat disappointed that Mr. Clark isn't here, because I would be very interested in talking or hearing from him. And also Rebecca Carroll, you said, from URI. So it's really important to me that everybody is on the same page. I understand that there's a meeting at URI on September 19th with housing that is, let's see, the next housing meeting is with URI is at 9 a.m. On the 19th. I think maybe Mr. Wagner and some of the other folks may be familiar with it. I think it would be really good if, I know I'm planning to attend as a member of the council to see what they're talking about, and I think it would be really good if we could all sort of be on the same page with them. There may be some overlap with the with the Wakefield Elementary site. I really just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, so I would love to see them here. And also just kind of maybe do that. I'd really like to see if we could meet at that.
Are you referring to the September 19th?
Yeah, the September
interboard
19th,
meetings?
Brian, do you know about that meeting at URI with, it's Narragansett, it's the council members from Narragansett, and then also URI staff, and there's a bunch of people that are coming together to discuss affordable housing in this greater area, and I'd just like to make sure that we're there.
I'm aware that URI and Narragansett have met in the past. Our affordable housing chair actually attended one of those original meetings as a bystander. She wasn't really an active participant, but she did provide me with the dates that those meetings are scheduled on, and yes, I was planning on trying to be there to at least sit on the sidelines and observe the discussion.
Okay, that's great. And I think it would be a valuable exercise if someone were able to attend from the EDC. I know it's not at the most convenient time, so it's like 9 a.m. during the week, so
Every day Saturday. Super, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for your time. It's very good information, and we look forward to our next meeting. Hopefully, we'll have that quarterly dashboard data by the next time we meet. And thank you for the input.
All right, great, thank you.
Super, thank you.
Thanks.
Good luck, new chair. Good luck. Good luck, new clerk.
All right, we're going to dive into the regular session tonight. It's a little bit after 7:30. Thank you all for coming. First order of business, as always, Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
Pledge States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next on the agenda is the land acknowledgement statement, which I will read. The town of South Kingstown pays homage to the indigenous people and land on which the town is now located. Let this acknowledgement serve as a reminder of our ongoing efforts to recognize, honor, reconcile, and partner with the Narragansett tribe, whose land and water we benefit from today. Next, we have the roll call.
Council President McEntee,
Here?
Council Vice President Marin,
Here.
Council Member Bergner,
Here.
Council Member Alley,
Here.
Council Member Sweet.
Here.
Thank you. All right, it's going to bring us to item 5, approval of minutes of previous meetings.
Motion to approve, sorry, Mike, item 5, A, B, and C.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right, that passes. It's going to bring us to item 6, the consent agenda.
Motion to approve items 6A, B, and C.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, that passes. It's going to bring us to item 7, licenses. A is a resolution granting a private detective license to Stephen O'Donnell and Associates LLC of Wakefield. Application by Stephen O'Donnell. Stephen, come on up. Right there at the podium.
Push the button on the right.
There you go. You turned it back off. The red light's going to stay on.
Red light.
Red?
Yeah.
There you go.
Gotcha. Good evening, everybody. Sorry. I'm not a technical person.
Well,
Not yet.
good evening. We have your request in front of us. You want to tell us what this is all about? Go ahead.
Sure. I have 40 years in law enforcement. Retired from around the state police 8 years ago. Since then, I've been in the private practice working with nonprofits. In the last 4 or 5 years, I've been consulting with legal experts defending cities and towns, mostly in police lawsuits, as an expert witness. So I decided about a year ago that's the track that I wanted to go back into, so I'd have one employee, me. So I'm leaving a 900-person organization to a 700-person organization, and I felt with what's happening in the world in the last couple of years and what continues to happen, law enforcement needs some help, and it's no knock on law enforcement. They need some people that have done it before that can help augment what they do locally, nationally, and internationally, and that's what I'm planning on doing.
All right. Any questions?
Not a question, but the colonel's being excessively modest and leaving out a former superintendent of the state police, and if I'm not mistaken, won awards from the White House.
I have.
Yeah. Just wanted to put that in there.
Thank you.
So just, what do you intend to do? You said you're going to serve as an expert witness?
I already do. That's a consultant
Okay.
business I have, but more importantly, work with different companies around the country that do similar things locally, nationally, internationally, where you can train law enforcement additional things with the active shooter situation going around. It's really important that there's people in the private sector that do this to help, again, not to take over the role of law enforcement, but private sector law enforcement security is booming internationally. So I plan to travel into different places. I've been to Moscow, Russia to do this. One, I was on the state police. So it's in my wheelhouse, and it's something that I want to do. And again, I want to contribute back to what I've done in the past. I think there's a huge need for it in the world today.
Excellent.
Thank you for sharing that, because I just imagined you following people around trying to figure out who was breaking the law and cheating on their spouse or whatever at a much
that's
higher
good-
level.
No, it's a great point. I would not do that. I've been asked to do that. It's not what I choose to do, and not who's violating the law. I wouldn't say it's not my responsibility. That's somebody else's. They wear uniforms. Ours is a high-end business where I'm going to go out and talk to people, look at buildings. When you walk into a building like this, what's the threat picture look like based on your experience? And there's a whole gamut of things that go with that. Also, when police get sued,
in lawsuits. I look at those cases for legal teams, the trust, and other attorneys, and look at it from your experience, and if you can support what the police did, because sometimes it gets kind of crazy in the international cycle where the police get vilified pretty quickly. And if the police are wrong, it's okay that someone steps in and talks to the police about it, and how do you fix it? So those are things that I bring, I think, my skill sets, and I actually enjoy doing it.
Excellent. Well, I'll say it is rare to have two former colonels in the town council chambers at the same time. So we're going to cherish this.
Gotcha.
Was he your-
There's
for Steve
many
Boss?
more of us out there.
Was he your commander, boss? What's the,
He was my boss. I still tremble when in fear when he walks in the room.
High energy person, so the colonel was in my command staff. Chief Moynihan was on our command staff. That's a tribute to you, that you got some quality people in this town.
I kind of want to have a picture, but.
All right. We don't
Motion
have to,
to
do the picture.
approve. We don't have to take a picture, but.
Well, thank you.
Motion to
Second.
approve.
We got a motion to approve. We got a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
That passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, it's going to bring us to item B, a resolution granting a temporary mass gathering permit to Extreme Airsoft and Peacedale Neighborhood Revitalization, Inc. of Wakefield to conduct the annual EA Fest Block Party on Sunday, September 29, 2024, from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Application by Danielle Martin. Danielle, if you're here, come on up. Or if any other representative is here for this item, feel free to come on up. All right. Nicole, have we heard anything from anyone on this item?
She had confirmed that she would be in attendance tonight for her temporary mass gathering permit.
Okay. So we'll move ahead. If she comes in, we'll move back. Otherwise, we'll table it to the next meeting.
we have time, we can just put it on the next agenda. She can still have her event, correct?
That would work out because she also has a concurrent Class F license that wasn't going to be able to make it for this application, so I'll just let her know.
All
Okay.
right.
Okay.
So do we need a motion to table it, or should we actually wait to see if she walks in? All right, we'll hold it. It's going to move us to item 8A, discussion and community comment.
Before we move on, could we have a motion to seal the minutes of the executive session?
Yep.
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes. Thank you, Amy.
And the record can note there were 2 votes taken in executive session that do not need to be disclosed at this time.
All right, we're now going to move to item 8, discussion and community comment. A, regarding proposed hazard recreation field land swap associated with the South Kingstown High School construction project to meet requirements of the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Luke Murray?
Good evening. I realize that this is a bit of an atypical item for our agenda to have a discussion and community comment outside the new business item, but this is a specific item that is required as part of the grant, not the grant, I apologize. It's part of the application process for a land conversion, and I'll explain that in a minute. But essentially, I'm going to present to you a little bit about the land swap that's proposed for the high school site that the school building committee has been working on. And then, if the council would indulge the community to provide some comment on this, and I'll explain a little bit as part of the application process on why that is. So I'll get into it. Tonight, really purpose and goals, we're going to review the existing and proposed conditions of the hazard field. We'll go over an overview of the Land and Water Conservation Fund program, the review of the 6F conversion requirements, hazard field, Land and Water Conservation Fund history and how we ended up tied up in the restriction, hazard field conversion proposal, and then offering the community some input on this process per the application requirements. So why are we here? This is really about a conversion of an existing field known as the hazard field, a historic field. It's approximately 5 acres. It's located adjacent to the existing high school. And what the proposal is to relocate the existing high school or build a new high school on the existing hazard field and then convert or transfer the existing property to the rear of the school where the existing site is. So if you can see my cursor here, you can see the outline of the existing building, and that footprint falls right in the middle of that proposed conversion area. So the idea being that the new school would be built on the existing field, and we'd relocate the fields after the existing building was raised. Many of us have seen these images. It was all part of the bond process. It's been out in the community. Hopefully the community knows that this is in process. These images have been showed many a time, and this plan has been shown many a time. So what's the Land and Water Conservation Fund? For those who don't know, it's a grant program that was established in 1965. It's administered by the National Park Service, so through the Department of the Interior, and it's managed locally by the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management, RIDEM. It provides matching grants to state and local government entities for the acquisition, development, and rehabilitation of public outdoor spaces. The idea being, it's a great program. It helps revitalize public spaces, but the caveat to this is that it comes with restrictions, which is termed as a Section 6F restriction. Therefore, once you accept these funds, you essentially restrict the property, and that's intentional. Going back to the origination of this grant, the idea was preservation of land, and what better way than to give money and then lock up that land and from being converted into other uses or being sold off. So it doesn't really matter if you take $500,000, $5 million, or $1, you fall into that same 6F restriction. And I'll go over how we ended up with the hazard field under restriction in a minute. So it applies to the entire property that's designated at the time. And this is important because when this was really in motion heavily in the 70s and early 80s, where a lot of funding was doled out, many people accepted the grant and just said, okay, we have a 50-acre parcel, we're accepting it for one ball field within that 50-acre parcel, but it doesn't matter. That restriction applies to the entirety of the park. So nowadays, people have come a little wiser. If you fund a playground within a certain parcel, you can actually restrict that individual element as opposed to the entirety of the parcel. But going back to the hazard field, that was not done. There was no designated portion that was exempted out from that. Councilwoman Bergner, did you have a question? I thought you had a, no?
Well, I do, but I don't want to interrupt.
It's okay.
So I just have a question about the process, because it's on the agenda as discussion and community comment, and so I take away that we're not going to vote on anything tonight. It's just really for public awareness, but then in the future, will we be having a actual vote on whether or not to proceed and pursue this? Yes.
There's actually not a vote required.
That was my question.
There's no vote required. What the
Okay.
requirement is that it be put out to the community and community allowed to provide comment.
Okay, because it was something that I had asked that we put on the agenda, because I had realized that we had never talked about it in allowed comment. And the second thing is, just a simple thing, will you link this PowerPoint presentation to the agenda so that other people can, I'm sure you were working on it
Sure.
through today, but so people at home watching can't follow along or have it. So
Yeah,
could you link it
absolutely.
later?
We can link it to the minutes, and then I'll also talk to the building committee about linking it to the school building site.
Yeah,
I think that's important as well.
so there's no vote required on the land swap?
That's correct.
You're sure?
I'm sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Right, Amy? Sorry. Just making sure.
We'll double check on that.
I just want to make sure that there's no hiccups or unintended issues.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. I'll double check with Paul Jordan. There's no harm in asking the question again to make sure, obviously, if it's required, we'll come back to council. That's not a problem. All right. Going into the Land and Water Conservation Fund history as it relates to the hazard field. So the town of South Kingstown accepted a grant in 1979 in the amount of approximately $30,000 for the renovation of the soccer fields, which in total exceeded $60,000 at the time. The agreement allowed the use of the field by the high school, but it was supposed to be on some sort of schedule, right, predetermined schedule. The one important thing about land and water conservation properties is you cannot restrict access. So this goes back to the point that the building committee did look at this site for a potential stadium, and it can't be exclusive for the use of the high school, and that would restrict it too much for that usage. So that was part of the consideration of the process. And as I mentioned, it's 5 acres under restriction. So why did the building committee choose that site? Well, I can tell you, for those who monitored the process, it was not determined lightly. there was a lot of process before we got to the determination that the field would be the preferable area to put the new school. And part of that, a large consideration, was keeping the students in place during construction. The placement of the new building on the existing field allows the students to stay in place for the entire duration of the construction, and as it's designed now, it will be that way, and that's what we fully intend to do. When the new building is built, the students would move over to the new facility, and the existing facility be raised, allowing for the converted property to exist. It also did allow some flexibility of arrangement of the property. As many of you know, or all of you know, the footprint is shrinking. So by doing that, we can kind of move it to the edge of the site, make a really efficient parking arrangement, and also connect it to the existing historic hazard building, which was another benefit. So essentially just works really well. So what we're proposing is the conversion of the field. You can see the red-lined area here. As you can see, we kept it off the east and west property lines, and part of that is in case that we have to run utilities and things along the perimeter of the site, that we allow ourselves a little bit of flexibility. Again, once you lock these things in, unintended consequences. So we're trying to be smart on how we're approaching this conversion as it relates to the construction. We've shared this with our current project team. They've all vetted it and feel that this is an appropriate conversion area for this site. So we are working on this application. The conversion process entails us to work closely with DEM. I've been in constant contact with DEM, making report backs to the committee, understanding what's required. This does require an independent appraisal, so we're in the process of getting an appraiser on board. They'll have to come out with an appraisal of the property. And just so everyone understands, typically you're not converting it on the same site. This is a kind of unique process. Typically, you would be converting this property for a brand new property, non-town owned, that somebody would purchase or the town would purchase with the intent of building out recreation opportunities on it. That is not the case here. So as I said, it's a little unique, so we'll only have to have one appraisal where typically you'd have two. We'll get a square foot cost on that appraisal, and we'll basically break it out because it's the same site. So essentially that cost would equal. And the whole point of this is typically to ensure that the land property you're swapping for is of equivalent value, both in numerical terms and in just the quality of the site. So for instance, you can't take a piece of beautiful property that's used as recreation spaces, then go to an industrial space that's a waste contaminated site and go say, we're going to put the park over there, which some have tried to do in the past. So there's a reason for the process, but I will tell you the applicability here, it's not as, not your typical process. That appraisal will have to go through what they call a Yellow Book review, which is essentially a peer review of that appraisal against the federal Yellow Book for standard for appraisal. So that's another consultant that'll have to come on board. But this is why we're here tonight. The application requires public engagement on the conversion of the proposal's potential impact on the communities disproportionately burdened by environmental stresses. So going back to my previous example of moving to a site that wouldn't be preferable, or with the environmental justice perspective, move it to a site that would not be comparable. That is the point of this process. Again, going to my earlier comments, that's not the case here. We're moving it on the exact same site in the exact same neighborhood, but we want to hear from the community if there is anything in those categories that would be concerning. So at this point, we need to submit an application to DEM for review. They, in turn, would review it, make sure it's complete, and they would turn it over to the National Park Service for review by the Department of Interior. The National Park Service then reviews, and they approve or deny the application. I will tell you, I've had discussions, and National Park Service is already involved in this process, and they've given us feedback, and it's been positive. So, because there was questions about the fact we're converting on the same property. And if approved, the town has a 3-year window to complete the conversion. So prospectively, we all know the school project is 2 to 3 years. We'd have it converted and finish out the project once the school building's gone. And just so we know we're not alone, there's other school districts that are going through this process as part of school build projects. Central Falls, Pawtucket, Lincoln, all going through this with DEM. I have confirmed with them. And similar situations, just they want to build on land that had been locked up by a land and water conservation restriction. This is not uncommon. These conversions happen quite often. Again, unintended consequences of taking, sometimes it's nominal money at the time. And as I said, we've received positive feedback to date. So really, to transition to the community questions, or anybody who would like to comment on this, these are the questions we're really trying to get answered. Does anyone have any concerns regarding the proposed conversion in general? Do they feel that this conversion will disproportionately burden the community in any way? And will the new field location disadvantage certain members of the community in general? And if there's any sentiment to that end. So at this point, I'll turn it over to council to solicit that feedback.
All right, thank you, Luke. So if anyone in the audience would like to come up, comment, speak on this issue, I invite you to just come on up. We'll just ask that you identify yourself. We'll limit you to 5 minutes. So with that said, first come, first serve. Come on up.
Roberta Mulholland, Matunic. I've been waiting for this for a very long time. I think it is disturbing that it took this long to come to the public about this land swap. And while it might have been the new building is placed on Hazard Field, I don't think the restriction on Hazard Field was made clear to the public. I don't think the process was tight enough. It shocks me that Luke has not asked legal counsel about whether or not this needs a town council vote. That's shocking. And what I didn't hear him say is what happens if National Park Service does not say okay. Last December, I went to a school building committee meeting to ask this question, and I was told by Luke at that meeting that he had had some conversations with Paul Jordan at DEM. He also told me he had zero in writing about this. He also told me that the school building committee had decided, I think in the spring, that if the swap wasn't approved, the only enforcement that NPS has is to make the town ineligible. I didn't hear him address that. I'd like to know if that's true. I'd like to know if any of these positive feedback from NPS is in writing, or if anything's in writing, because I asked many times what's in writing about this, and there was nothing. I also asked when the application was going to be made. I was told it wasn't going to be made until after the bond referendum. Why? To save money. I don't think it was to save money. I think it was a political move by the school building committee that should not be part of the school building committee. So again, what's the route we're taking if it's denied? Is in fact what Luke said last December, that we are ineligible for future land and water conservation grants? Is that true? And is it possible that 9 committee members, most all of who are not elected, can decide to say, you know what, we're not eligible anymore, but we think this is important? I hope that you make that decision, not a committee, not a bunch of elected people. They all work hard. I'm not putting any of them down, but this feels so loosey-goosey to me. It doesn't make me feel comfortable, and I really think that we need some more answers. And putting these questions up here, that might have been something to advertise and say, a written report instead of the oral report with these slides would have been good, so that we could download it from the agenda and know ahead of time what he was going to say. It's a problem I have with every school building committee report. It's not in writing. We can't download it, and there's no record. You might think we'd have a record with minutes. There have been 13 school building committee meetings this year. The minutes to one meeting have been filed with the Secretary of State. One meeting. Happens to be the one that I think they talk about Mr. Littlefield. But these are the minutes. These are completely illegible because of the format they use. So, open and transparent, I don't think that they can claim that. I think a lot more should be provided to you, and you should know for certain whether you need to vote to apply to swap the land. It just doesn't seem commonsensical that you don't have a say in that. It is land owned by the town. But also, what happens if it's not approved? We should know the answer to that. You should know the answer to that. And I do think that this needs to be advertised a little more. I think it's way late. It's way late. Because if that's not allowed, and there is what Luke said last December, are you really going to let the building committee make that decision? I hope not. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. All right, anyone else in the audience wish to speak on this? I invite you to just come on up. All right, seeing none, any comments from the council?
Yeah. Oh, do you want to respond to anything, Luke?
Yeah, I'll respond to a couple things because I think it's important. I don't think, I want to defend a little bit of the building committee here because we've acknowledged this for a long time. I mean, almost every meeting we've, especially early in the process, we talked about this. I answered a number of questions during the bond vote. It's in the FAQs of the school building site. I understand that there might be some apprehension by the community, but I had acknowledged this in public, and Roberta's right. If this was denied, acknowledged, and although I think it's slim, there's always the possibility they could deny it. The only stick that the state wields is to deny grants, future grants, because they really don't have any other leverage. Have they done it today? I have not. I'm a former planner. I've dealt with Land and Water Conservation Fund for a dozen plus years. I've never heard of a grant denied, and I can tell you there's violations all over the state. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that that is what it is. But full disclosure, if we get denied, we could face some impact of that. And I don't think the school building committee has ever not acknowledged that. As far as moving forward, there was a building plan developed, and I think we all saw that building plan, and we disclosed the fact that this was a hurdle in the process. But the bigger hurdle was, at the time, the RIDE process, and the fact that we would completely miss out on some substantial incentives if we did not keep the process rolling. Again, that's just timing and the way the process went. So I just don't want the community to feel that the building committee did not try to put the information out there or there was something not disclosed. Is it a hurdle? Absolutely. Is this something we need to get through? Yes. Will we make best effort? Absolutely.
Luke, is there,
No,
I'm sorry.
I thought I was.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm sorry. So I just want to go back to some of the things Roberta said so that while you're here, that's
Sure.
why. So you were the chair, you're not the chair, the minutes, is that an accurate, I haven't checked lately, are the minutes
My
not?
understanding is there are missing minutes.
Okay.
It has been brought to the chair's attention.
Okay.
And she has acknowledged that she's working on it with the
Okay.
executive assistant of the superintendent to try to
Okay.
get those up online and get caught up with all the minutes. So
Okay.
that is true.
So great. So is there anything that we need to do to help expedite the minutes getting up for the community to be able to access them? And if they're not legible, she had a bunch of black squares. So like, is that a formatting issue? I don't know.
I think it's something we can bring back to the building committee and
Okay.
express the council's concern that that's not done.
Is that okay with everybody that we try to, whatever resources we need to move this project so that people can get the information is a good thing. The next thing, Roberta asked about the vote, and the reason why I asked is because the previous councils were voting on the land swap with the hospital, not that it's the same, but it's the same but different. So why would we be advancing that application? That council was going to vote to advance that application to the parks or whoever lent the money to the hospital to extricate that. So it does follow logic that there would need to be a vote.
Yeah, and listen, I'm going to eat my words here because we make mistakes,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, no,
I probably
no.
shouldn't have spoken to
Right,
that.
yeah, I
The
understand.
reality of the situation is I need to check.
Yep.
I will speak with legal
Yeah.
counsel, and I will make absolutely sure. If it requires a vote, we'll certainly bring it back. And if this council wants a vote, even though it's not required.
Well, Luke, why couldn't we vote tonight? If it
Well, it's
requires a
on-
vote, we could do a vote.
But
This is
it's not
consistent with the
advertised that
plan.
way?
I
So
don't think
was-
it's posted
It's
that
not
way.
advertised that way. So I was going to suggest that we add this to the next meeting as a business item. I can make a motion that we add this to the next next meeting as a business item, so we can have another discussion and a vote, so that there's another opportunity for people to say anything or not, and that we can then clearly indicate that we would like to pursue the land swap.
Go ahead.
That's a
Fine.
motion.
Any second? All right, discussion, go ahead.
The swap, putting the new high school on Hazard Field and having the field on where the existing high school is, that was part of the Phase 2 application to RIDE.
Yes,
That was voted on by the school building committee.
it was.
It was voted on by the school committee.
Yes,
It was voted on by this council.
correct.
Thank you.
So we would have to vote to submit the application. So the motion is as, we would.
I just had a
To
question,
the
if I
parks.
could. I know that we've discussed this before, and there is some uncertainty about when we can expect a decision. I know that these things are really hard to pin down, but could you speak to that? Like, when do we think that we'll get, how long is this going to take, basically?
I don't know the answer to that question, if I'm being honest. I think I'd have to get a better indication from DEM on what the timelines and National Park Service. I can tell you it can take up to a year, right? Knowing in my past discussions in dealing with land and water conservation, it can take up to a year. I know that there's a new administration in place. They've been turning around the decisions. We just converted, if you remember, the Green Hill property, which is a long past due conversion that the town rectified. That decision came back in a couple months. So
We have about 9 months now until we want to get this started, right? 9-10 months, so...
I think the honest question for the council to consider is, if it didn't go through, would we put the entire brakes on the project, right? With a $150 million bond in a balance, and where that school goes, I can't say that's not a consideration the council should take in their advisement.
So I would rather, I know we have a motion and a second to have a discussion next week.
That's fine.
I would just rather have that and go through, and then there would be a majority or vote up or down on it, and then we could cross that box off to authorize the staff to submit the application, maybe to hurry it along a little quicker so that we would have more information if it passes. But there's no harm in actually taking a vote of the 5 of us. Mike, you're right. If stage one, stage 2 all advanced that way, we did. But we still need to authorize the application as well. That's my
I think we
understanding
need
based
to-
on
right.
what we've done in the past for the hospital swap. Other councils have voted on it multiple times.
All right, so I'm okay with having this vote at a subsequent meeting, but I would like legal opinion at that meeting to advise whether a vote is necessary. I prefer to take a vote regardless to show my assent, affirming the fact that actions we're taking is consistent with the bond referendum that passed. And I caution any council member to vote in a way which is inconsistent with what the townwide vote reflected on that date. We should be moving forward in a direction that is consistent with what the voters approved. They want a new high school, and we have to take action to put that into effect. I don't know if this requires a vote by the council or not, but I'm happy to take one regardless. So legal counsel will find out whether it's required, but I'm still happy to take a vote anyway to show our affirmance of the plan and moving forward with it.
Well,
That's where I'm at.
You're not threatening people that they
I'm
can't
not
change
threatening
their vote,
anyone.
right? Because you just said you vote in the way
All I
that the
said is I
town said.
caution.
Okay, all right, well, it's fine. I think we should, he said you have to vote in a certain way.
I did not say that.
You did.
No, I did not.
You kind of said, I caution you not to vote in a different way. Everyone has to vote any way they want any time, but it did sound sort of like you all need to get in line. So I'm just going to say, we should take the vote and see how it goes. I think it's going to be fine. You all seem to be so nervous about it. I just think it's better for the community to know that we want Luke to go ahead and apply.
Absolutely. I feel, I'm super excited about this location and for the simple reason that the kids get to stay in place while the construction is going on. I think that really is a big, strong incentive for me.
If we could take the vote tonight, I would take the vote tonight, but the process.
I just don't want to delay them, but
It's not
is
going
it
to
gonna
delay anything. He's not
Well,
working
at
on it.
the moment, we
We're
don't
gonna
even- we
actually,
don't
by
believe
voting
this
on it, get
requires a
him to
vote.
work on it. Right? If we take a vote and say, advance the application, even though it's been said in other arenas, he can move forward. We can direct the staff, the town manager, direct the staff to move that application forward.
I just don't
Wait,
want to
let's-
wait
let's
another
pause
2
here.
weeks.
Legal
for him
counsel,
to
can we
have
take a
to
vote
go.
on this tonight?
He's not working on it.
I would have liked to see clearer language on the agenda indicating that a vote was called for, and I would suggest if you're going to vote in 2 weeks, why don't we just have the vote
All right.
in 2 weeks after our office can give you a definitive answer of whether or not a vote is even required?
All right, excellent. Luke, we'll do the same thing in 2 weeks. He'll give us this presentation. There'll be a vote to entertain on the agenda. Roberta, you got something else?
That I was here to say, don't do it. I wasn't. The process has been loosey-goosey. And it shocked me when he had not sought legal counsel on whether you needed to vote. The process is what I had a problem with. I'm certainly not here to say, don't vote on the land swap. That would be ridiculous. So for those of you kind of making faces at me or being disgusted, you didn't need to be. That's not what I'm here for. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Luke, you said we would have 3 years to complete the project. Could you explain that?
So once you receive an approval from National Park Service, they give you a window in which to actually, in a typical case, go settle a purchase and sale on a property, acquire that property, execute the conversion, and actually, finish out the process. In our case, it's really the demolition of the building that would be the big hurdle. So I don't see any concerns with that 3-year window because we're expecting to start breaking ground next spring or summer. So essentially, it's a 2-year project. We would hear back, and then we'd be within that window to convert.
So conceivably, we could start construction and then get approval, and then it would start counting when we got the approval.
After the fact, yes.
And what would happen if it was not finished in that 3-year period?
Again,
the school's
I
gonna
will
be
tell
a-
you, I've asked that same question to DEM, and they did not have a very clear answer.
Because I'm
Again,
assuming
it's-
finished is everything to grade also, not just the removal of the existing high school.
So I will tell you this, in my discussions with DEM, there is no clear fine or penalty that you incur whether you convert or not, or if you convert within the time periods. Like, I've asked that question, I cannot get a clear answer.
Just want to follow up. So I had the same similar question about conversion. So to complete the conversion, does that mean the park needs to be flipped? It needs to be completely done and usable? Or does it need, because the high school could take 3 years and it could be, say, May or June before they clear out of and they finish, and then we might say, well, we don't have, it's not the time to knock it all down and create all this noise and dust. The school's about to start. Like, does it have to be done? Like, done and usable? Or is it, like,
My understanding is done and usable. The idea being that you have beneficial use. It's exchanged, but,
so then it makes almost no sense to submit an application quickly,
so I'm glad you
Because-
brought that up.
right? Because if you say you submit it now, whatever, September 1st, and they don't approve it until June, you have 3 years from June, but in reality, the construction's not done until June, and they really can't get to that other piece, right?
So I'm glad you brought that up because it reminded me, there was a comment made, we did it for money. That wasn't never the case. I expressed this during the process. The reason I held off was that 3-year conversion window to hold off until exactly this moment where we were on a track
Right.
and to close that window. I didn't want to be outside of that window, so it was not for money. And I did express that on a number of occasions, that was the reason why I did not want to apply early.
Well, I don't know really what the cost would be to the application, so I'm not certainly concerned, because I'm going to vote to swap the land, and I don't have an issue with that. I think it's a good, smart decision based on a lot of things, but what is the cost? Like, you say an appraisal, and then where would that money come from?
So I've talked to Brian about this, right, whether we can tag it to the school funds, but I will tell you that an appraisal, given that it's limited in a yellow book, probably be under $10,000, based on the previous
So it's the cost is really just that, it's staff time and
Correct.
your time, staff time, and the one appraisal.
One appraisal and then the yellow book review. So the appraisals, I would estimate $5,000 to $6,000. The yellow
Yeah.
book's a couple $1,000s.
Okay. So, okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from council members for Luke? Anyone in the public who hasn't spoken on this yet wish to come up? You sure, Bob? Come on up. Come on up.
Bob Traeger, Succotash Road. Anyway, I've already told you why I come to the meetings. I never know what's going to happen, and then you sit and you listen. And I found this to be quite shocking, that there's so much questioning about even the use of the land. Am I catching that right? Or that somebody's got to approve that the federal government's involved in this? Holy mackerel, you know how problem what that is. I mean, what I would like to have an answer to, but nobody can give it, is, who are the actual individuals involved in making these decisions that are affecting all kinds of activity that is, we approved $150 million bond to do this. I would think all of this stuff was very much under control before. I'm surprised, that's all. I might not be catching it all that well, I will say one thing, I can hear now, though. So I do hear the words spoken. But the words spoken are not necessarily all hooked up too well. Everybody's doing their thing. I'm going to talk in public comments on. That's my comment for this. It's a little shocking to me, what I'm hearing. That's all. I think your comment, Terry, is, I could never do what you just did, but you did it.
All right. Thank you, Bob. All right. We're going to move on now to new business. A is a resolution adopting a citation recognizing Robert Littlefield for his service as the interim school superintendent. Bob Littlefield is not present tonight, but happy to pass and approve this. We worked with Bob and the assistant superintendent over the last year, and they did a great job. It was a great working relationship. We felt we had a good time working through the budget together, good transparency, and we hope to continue that with the new superintendent and new administration currently. So, do I hear a motion on this item? Yeah, I'll read B as well. A resolution adopting a citation recognizing Alexis Meyer for her service as the interim assistant superintendent. Let's pass both of these at the same time.
Motion to approve item 9A and B.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes. Let's go move us to item C. Terry Murphy, come on up.
Good evening, Terry Murphy, Director of Leisure Services. For this item, this is an expanded scope of work for Beta Group, Inc. for the Old Mountain Field engineering and design and bid documents for completion of the entirety of Phase 1. As you all are very much aware, I've been up here on numerous occasions talking about this project, and we initially budgeted in the CIP for Phase 1A, which is really the restroom and concession building and the surrounding area, which is the biggest need. But as this has evolved and there's the possibility of more funding, we are recommending that the entirety of Phase 1 bid plans and documents are prepared and ready to go out to bid. Regardless of if the entirety of the funding is there to complete Phase 1, it just makes sense to do all of that in one project phase. And so what we are recommending is that the scope of work be expanded, and that would bring the existing contract, which is for $109,000, to $264,371. And just to review what that includes, Phase 1B includes the redesign of the parking lot and the vehicular access throughout the park. So right from Old Mountain Road all the way up through to the pond in the back. And that also involves a design of a rotary turnaround at that end to provide for safer moving in and out of the parking lot. There will be parking spaces only on one side of the parking lot, and then the other major component of Phase 1B is the actual pedestrian access walkway that also traverses that line of the parking lot all the way through the park, and will eventually include in future phases connectivity to each park amenity. So that's a major improvement on the safety side. This also includes lighting within the parking lot, which was another major feature that was discussed during public sessions for this project. So that's what we are looking for, and if the council is so inclined.
Thank you, Terry. Any questions?
Where will the extra money come from?
So what we are hoping is if there is an opportunity through rescue plan dollars that may be available, that the council may choose to allocate any funds that are there to this Phase 1 project. This is going to be an aggressive timeline in terms of establishing or putting together the bid documents in order to go out to bid in November. The contractor is aware of that. They are already preparing documents for Phase 1A. This will allow for the start of Phase 1B to also get underway, so that we'll have them prepared for November.
So a couple of one basic question. Remember when we saw some renderings of Old Mountain Field in a town council meeting? Where would the public find those if they wanted to look at them so that we could get them excited about this plan?
There's a dedicated page on the Parks and Recreation website, and there's a link right there to Old Mountain Field Master Plan, and there are presentations, versions of the presentations that have been put forth at the public work sessions.
I know this is a lot to ask, but maybe, and I'm looking at the clerk, and when items like this come to the agenda, it says the new master plan in her memo, if we could hyperlink so that we could show people, so that if it was their first time coming and looking, because I was well, let me quickly Google to see if I can find it, and I can't find those beautiful renderings, because we had that meeting, and I remember, you wanted to advance as quickly as possible some of the improvements, so, but if you don't, it's just hard to hunt backwards, so if we could always be a little bit more mindful as a staff, where's the original documents that we started talking about this, so that people could look at them?
Mm-hmm.
That'd be helpful. Second thing, so Greg asked the question about the money, and I do see that you have money in the CIP and in the ARPA funds, which is great. And that, I think it's going to address some of the concerns about the ADA. We had feedback, correct?
We actually have one more public presentation on September 16th.
Okay.
And the primary focus of that discussion is accessibility.
Okay.
The plans do provide for ADA compliancy, but again, there was some discussion about whether or not that is sufficient, or if the
Understood.
designer could do more.
And then unrelated, but I still have a question about the fencing at Old Mountain Field. It's kind of in disrepair. When would that, this is unrelated to that project, when is that going to be addressed, all the broken railings?
Those were repaired in July. There were railings that were fully repaired in July.
Okay.
Now, if there are some that have broken since, we can certainly
Okay.
go back and repair those. That's a tough fence. It's very, very old, and
Yeah.
it's needing a lot of TLC. But those were repaired back in July when that item, I think the manager pointed it out.
Okay,
To me,
I
and so-
apologize. I haven't driven by there recently, so
There could be another one down,
Okay.
but
I just, okay, thank you. That's it, thank you.
All right. Do I hear a motion on this item?
Motion to approve item 9C.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes.
thank you.
Rich Bourbonnais, come on up.
Good evening. I have 4 items here. Item D is with regard to Green Hill Pond and some of the work we've been doing down there over the years. As you know, I've been in and out of here for a number of reasons, but particularly because we were doing some water quality work down there. For the past 2 years, it involved a lot of design work. We received a couple years ago $100,000 from SNEP, or Southeast New England Network programs, Southeast New England programs, and also from Narragansett Bay Estuaries programs. We received $100,000 to do all this design work. Well, recently we received $250,000 through SNEP, but it was from the Restore American Estuaries dollars, effectively EPA dollars, to do the construction. So, all the design work is done, all the permitting is done, but now we'd like to enter into a grant agreement for this $250,000, and this is what the request is, to allow the town manager to do that.
All right, thank you, Rich. Any questions?
So you're asking for the town to apply some matching funds so that, I'm just reading your memo and it looks like that?
It does. It includes $83,000 in matching funds.
Mm-hmm.
And the 250, again, would be a grant as part of this. A third, 33% matching funds,
Okay, so this says
30%.
the town would need to provide the remaining match of $16,500. Right? By change order, the town approved, blah, blah, blah.
$83,000.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it would come from the TMDL reserve funding that we have.
Okay,
Generally, over the past, 8 or so years, we've been applying money to this TMDL fund, and that's where all of these matching funds have come from over the years for all of the work, including the work that was done in the Petaquamsket on the Narrow River.
Is this one of the grants that we've gotten through the new grant writer that we hired
Yes.
a couple of years ago?
Yes.
Okay, I would love to see a running tally of how much we've generated from that position, Jim, at some point.
Sure.
Okay.
All right, any other questions for Rich on this? So it's a $250,000 grant. We're going to put up $83,000, about 1/3 of the portion for the total cost here. Do I have that right?
Yes.
All right.
makes sense.
Do I hear a motion on this?
Motion to approve item 9D.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right, that passes.
The second item is, again, with T-Mobile at Mortucket. You've seen a number of these. We are redoing the pods on the top of the towers. T-Mobile is going to be moving from a pod on Mortucket and moving over to the new future railing. This is most likely the last one we'll do. I believe it's the, this should be it. We've done them all. And what's really kind of exciting about this, because this has been a long process. I mean, this was when John was here. I mean, we've been dealing with this for, I would say, 5 years or so. The last 2 have been fairly intense, but it looks like, October 1st. In fact, T-Mobile has already submitted the building permit for the railing, and we could see some construction out there. We can only do 1 tower at a time because we have to take it offline, so we can't have both towers offline. So hopefully, if we can, if we can keep things going the way it's going, you'll see some construction out there in October. Be perfect. And then by the time summer comes next year, we'll have these new railings, and it'll be much safer.
Excellent. Do I hear a motion on this one?
Motion to approve item 9E.
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, that passes.
Item F, this is for the bid award for sodium chlorite. You may remember it was only a month and a half, so a month and a half ago I was here, and we requested a contract, a supplier came up with a cost for sodium chloride. It was exceptionally low. We all agreed. We all looked at it and thought it was crazy. Sure enough, I think they were looking at liters, not gallons, when they made the bid. So we're going back to our original supplier. There was a problem on the supplier's end with their notification when these projects come down the line. They didn't even know it had gone out to bid. So they ended up getting it anyways. It's I believe it's 16 cents more per gallon, which is a fairly modest increase over previous year's pricing. And we'd like to award them that contract, if that's okay. And again, I think I talked about it last time I was here, but we had a little bit of stockpile because we were afraid that was going to happen. I think we kind of knew that was going to happen, that they weren't going to be able to keep that price. Another part of this. Let me explain one more thing on that. I'm sorry. I think you might have been about to say something, but there's another component here is that we have to rescind the previous bid, and unfortunately, that didn't make it to the agenda. So I probably will be back to make a little bit of housekeeping. I think I might come back to rescind that, but that doesn't preclude us from going ahead and moving forward on a new contractor. I've talked with the solicitor's office about that, and we can move forward. But I think in the honor of just to keep good housekeeping here, we'll come back and rescind that in the future.
All right, so we'll approve this tonight and rescind the former one at the subsequent meeting. All right.
Please.
All right, do I hear a motion on this?
Motion to approve item 9F.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes.
The final item, every year we spend approximately $29,000, at least that's what we have budgeted every year, for paint striping. We restripe much of the town. This is was a bid. We would like to award it to K5 Corporation, primarily for waterborne paint. We don't use epoxy anymore. And it's what we'll end up spending is, again, approximately $29,000. This will come from, and I put the account in there, but the Highway Division Professional Services account is where the money comes from. You'll see it in the budget coming up this year. It will be the same thing. This is a 2-year contract, but this $29,000 is strictly for this year, for 24-25. You'll see them out there. It'll be sometime in the spring, and they'll do the entire town very quickly. And then, we'll be back again with them next year, and we'll give them the whole year to do that. But this is for a 2-year contract.
Motion to approve item 9G.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
All right, Jamie Gorman, come on up.
Good evening. Currently, we have agenda item H. I'm seeking for the authorization to purchase Chevy Equinox 2024. The memo I put together doesn't clarify that this will be a shared vehicle between 3 departments, including building, the town assessor, as well as the planning staff. This is funded for fiscal year 24-25. 15,000 will be coming from the tax assessor, 20 from building and zoning. Right now, it couldn't be a better time if this is authorized. Currently have 1 vehicle about 3 weeks out with police doing diagnosis, and another vehicle that's tied up with multiple repairs. But it seems like right now there's no 2 or 3 day repairs. It's multiple weeks. But I think this will be a great flexibility for all department staff.
All right. Any questions for Jamie?
Just a question. It's an SUV. I'm just curious why that size vehicle is needed if it's just doing inspections and things like that. You want to explain that choice?
So it's kind of like a crossover SUV, but all-wheel drive. We currently have a Chevy Volt, which we're using, but we can't find any sedans that are all-wheel drive, that are domestic makes. Typically, we're on job sites, usually riprap, big rocks, number of issues where we've ripped things off the bottom of the car because of that. And a lot of the job sites are, the driveway from the road can be 100 feet to a quarter mile, depending on where you're going. But that's primarily what it is, the reason for the SUV.
That makes sense. Thank you very much for saying that.
One note on that, we've looked at many vehicles. The Equinox is definitely the most affordable vehicle, cheapest we can find that serves the purpose. Like Jamie was saying, some of the vehicles we have, the ground clearance, the building inspectors are going on job sites with ruts and so forth and so on. Plus they go on inclement weather, whenever it is, whether it's rain or snow. But for $34,000, these vehicles are really the most affordable vehicles, rather than getting bigger trucks or much bigger SUVs.
Thank you. I totally agree. It's always nice to explain it because people wonder why that car, why can't you just get the smallest little Ford Focus? But thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions for Jamie? All right, do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve item 9H.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Luke Murray, come on up.
Good evening again. Multiple presentations tonight.
Luke, what we'll do with this is we'll try to take I and J together if we can.
Sounds good.
No, these are 2 different things. Go ahead.
So I is pertaining to the purchase of a CD3 solar-powered boat washing station for Warden Pond Boat Ramp. This is related to a grant that we've received notification from DEM that we received. If you remember, we came in January, February to discuss this and the Hydrilla grant together. DEM was here at the time. We discussed the fact that Warden Pond had a watershed plan that made it eligible for this 319 grant. We pledged to bring this back, if we did receive the grant, to council for approval prior to entering any agreement. The grant that we've received a notification on is $35,000. It would require a match from the town of $23,334, or approximately 40% of the project cost. I do want the council to know, I did have in the memo that I thought the cost may be a little bit more after conferring with the vendor. The quote for the unit itself, the base, the software and accessories was approximately $47,000. That leaves a little bit of wiggle room within our match to do the installation and things that I think would be required. So I do not think it'll exceed that $23,000 in cash, and we may actually be a little bit less and may be able to use some of our labor on the install to leverage towards that match requirement. Just so everyone knows what we're talking about, and you have this in your package, this is what this unit looks like. It has a solar panel on top. It's self-contained. It has a tank Essentially, people can vacuum, scrub their boats as it comes out. Obviously, hydrilla, which has been found in Warden Pond, and actually DM recently issued a report saying it's a little bit more extensive than we originally thought. It's approximately 150 acres of the 1,000-acre water body. So it's clearly spreading and something that could spread to other water bodies. And you can see a picture in the winter. It's covered. It has to be winterized. So it is a maintenance concern there. Just so you understand the installation, we're thinking that Highway could do the install. I have talked to the Highway Superintendent about this. It's a precast base set down on crushed stone or no stone at all, essentially sets, and then the unit sits independent of that. So just so the council understands, the way we look at it in administration is always, what's the maintenance considerations moving forward. This comes directly from the vendors. So battery replacement in 5 to 6 years, $50 to $75 per pump out. We're expecting maybe 2 to 3 times per year. Tool replaces as needed, especially if it gets vandalized. Winterization, and there is a software subscription. We'd seek to roll in probably multiple years to capitalize it into the first contract. So essentially like 3 to 5 year contract. But beyond that, we would then have to engage in some sort of contract for the extension of the software. And the software essentially provides monitoring of the system to know when it's full or there's issues with the unit itself. And so I put here the annual cost could run, this is from the manufacturer, $1,200 to $1,600. I put in the memo, being conservative, we should probably expect $2,000 to $5,000, especially as the unit gets older. So certainly something to consider. Moving in, you want to move right into hydrilla? Okay. We've also been notified that we received the Bay and Water Restoration Fund grant, Narragansett Bay and Water Restoration Fund grant, in the amount of $155,000. Again, if you remember, we talked about this in January/February. We talked about the threat of hydrilla and what the state was doing to address the need. The state did come through. They did provide treatment for first year this year through a U.S. Fish and Wildlife grant that they received in the amount of $133,000. And that has been done as of tomorrow. That last treatment will go out. This grant would cover 2 seasons. So just to clarify my memo, because I know it kind of might have been confusing, the way I wrote it was that the grant would cover 2025 and then the town would cover 2026. In actual mechanics, it'd probably be a 50-50 match for each season. So essentially, we would pay half, they would pay half for 2025 and 2026. So our match comes in the form of $125,000 that we would put in towards a contracted vendor to go do the treatments on the lake. I just wanted to make note that Mike Stack has done a great job in being the liaison with the Indian Lake Response Coalition. And they've formed recently. They've done quite a bit of groundwork and got everyone kind of engaged in this process. I did speak with a representative of that group who said that they had committed $5,000 to help the effort, and they acknowledged that that's a small fee at this point, but they do intend to have fundraisers. And the thing I guess I'll express to council is there seems to be an understanding that this is not a long-term town issue, that eventually a nonprofit or partner in association with DM would have to take the ball on it. And, speaking personally, I think that was welcomed, that there was an understanding there that this doesn't necessarily fall on this body. And just to know, Indian Lake, as you know, is not owned or controlled by the town, but it is a tributary to other waterways, so hydrilla is definitely a concern that we'll probably grapple with at some point. I believe I've touched upon everything.
Let's have Mike Stack come on up too. I'd like him to address the efforts of the Indian Lake Hydrilla Response Coalition.
Good evening. What specifically?
Just maybe talk about their efforts, their concerns. You've been working with them actively. Maybe you could just sort of convey what their message, obviously their position is, whatever help they can get to help mitigate the hydrilla spread.
Sure.
So go ahead.
Yeah, so to Luke's point, we've had the conversations with them. Obviously the town appears to be supporting that at this juncture, but there's no commitment forever. And how can that issue be mitigated there? I will say they formed very quickly. They got organized very quickly, recognized that this was a significant issue and a significant threat to the local waterway, working with DEM. And so I would say Friends of the Saugatucket, the Indian Lake Hydrilla Response Coalition, DEM and the town, we've all been working very closely to come up with the quickest and best solution to attack this as quickly as possible, because we know time is certainly a priority for proper treatment. The longer we wait, it grows at such a rapid rate, it becomes an even bigger problem. So DEM's already treating at Indian Lake this year. Warden Pond is yet to be determined on how best to address that, and hopefully there'll be a similar organization, or perhaps maybe a town-wide organization that can look at this issue, because if it's in these two water bodies, there's a good chance it's going to be in other water bodies, or if it's not, it will be soon. And there's other states that are spending millions of dollars on this issue alone each year. So we're kind of late to the party compared to other states having to deal with this.
Thank you.
I don't know if this is for you, Mike or Luke, but do I understand in the future you're looking at NGOs to take over the grant application and
I don't think that's
completion process?
I don't think that's been determined. I think that the discussions we've had is, right now, this is where we are. The council's approved what it's approved thus far. You have this before you this evening if you want to move forward on this, but there's no guarantee going forward. So in the best interest of all these local waterways, it makes sense to have these organizations, if they're able, to step up, and also they may be able to tap funds that municipalities may not be able to tap as well. So we're just trying to kind of look at all angles and have a robust response to this, because we recognize it's a significant issue, and we don't want to just kind of take what we can as it comes. We want to get ahead of this and be able to attack it at every level.
I absolutely agree about the significance of the issue. I'm just trying to figure out if DEM grants or federal grants are limited to municipal entities.
I think it depends on the specific grant. So there are other grants, like the Wood Pawcatuck watershed has a grant process. So there are other grant opportunities that I think are open to multiple organizations. And so, again, just trying to cover every angle that we can going forward. And, you know, nothing's a guarantee, right? So if we treat, if this were to be authorized, DEM treated this year, we have the next 2 years, what happens at year 4? Does the town want to continue with that? Does the state want to continue with that? The problem still persists, right? So if we have a backstop to that to go forward, we're just trying to have all our contingencies, basically.
And I think from the presentation that the DEM rep made to us a few months ago, it's very clear, you know, we're ground zero right now, but this is going to spread inevitably through boating activity.
Absolutely.
If nothing else.
That's how it got here, almost definitely.
And I'm happy to support it or support organizations that are going to do that. I just wanted to understand the relationship. We're doing the grant now, but it may not be us in the future.
Correct. I would say, and I'll defer to Luke, but I would say we're not saying that that's what's going to happen. We're saying that's a possibility. Let's prepare for it, right? Because, you know, what the funding situation in the town looks like and the grants available in a few years may be very different, and the treatment requirement may not have ended.
I've also discussed with some of the representatives of the organizations that the town and they need to make this a state issue with our legislature so that there's more grant funds available to try and nip it in the bud. Oversimplifies it, but that's the concept. Thanks.
Let me ask you this, Mike. If we continue to put resources toward the mitigation of the spread of hydrilla, is there an end in sight down the road somewhere?
I would leave that to the biologists who study this and know more than I do. It appears that while it may be mitigated and reduced, it's an ongoing issue. It doesn't appear that it's fully eradicated when I look at surrounding states and other states throughout the country that are spending to the tune of millions of dollars. And to your point, it does seem like the state maybe was a little bit behind the 8 ball on this and not having a plan ready to go, knowing that it was in adjacent states and other states are grappling with this. I would agree, especially in such a small state where people are frequenting all these water bodies, it would make sense to have a statewide plan. I think that Katie, who spoke with you folks, she's been put in a position to kind of move that along, but as you know, it's all comes down to resources and funding, and I don't know that they have everything they need to move on that. The good news is we were also awarded a grant, which there's no cost other than match time to the town for a lake management plan for Indian Lake and the watershed. So we'll be looking to move that forward, and that's a great opportunity, and I don't know that there's many other water bodies that have that. And that will also open up additional funding sources that weren't available for that watershed currently because it didn't have a lake management plan. So we are really moving aggressively, all of these organizations and the town, in conjunction with DEM. They're kind of a pass-through for a lot of this funding. As far as government works, I think it's pretty rapid when you look at, in basically a year, the amount of funding and treatment that's already occurred. And so hopefully that's a good sign for mitigating it.
Thank you. All right, Luke, let me ask you a few questions here. On the boat washing station, if we approve this, we can anticipate that it'll be up and running by the spring, the next opportunity people are putting boats in the water, or what are we looking at?
Yes, we'll have it up and running by that point. We can issue, actually, I've already spoken to DEM. They want to use the current year funding or last year's funding from their program. So they've actually asked that we put a PO in place this month. So we'd have it on order, we'd get it delivered, work with Highway to get it installed, but well in advance of the next spring boating season.
Great. Now, as to Indian Lake, I know the grant covers 2 years. So the 155, half of that will go toward fiscal year 25, half of that 26. Am I interpreting this right?
That's correct. Essentially, we would divvy it up 50-50 depending on how the bids came back.
And our portion is 125, which is 2 years, so that cut in half will be fiscal year 25 and then fiscal year 26?
Correct. 125 is all-in cost for 2 years.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on this?
Do you see another washing station having to go in someplace else?
Well, I will tell you, I would assume that Indian Lake would be an obvious one, and I think that DEM would have liked to have one there. Because they didn't have a lake management plan, we could not apply for this grant for that specific purpose. I would anticipate either they or they may come back to the town again to look at another grant for a boat washing station. So how the council handles that, if they come again, that's completely up to you. But I would anticipate they'd want more out there deployed to be able to do the boat washing. They did have staff out at Indian Lake this year to educate people on boat washing. They had interns as part of this treatment plan.
Mike, you want to add some clarity there?
Just to clarify, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife grant that DEM received, that they're treating currently, provided for greeters and people to educate at Indian Lake that were there this summer, as well as a boat wash station. That hasn't been installed. I don't know the timeline on that, but that was part of the initial application. So it's my understanding that that's coming to Indian Lake, but I don't have anything further on that. Thanks. Yep.
All right. Any other questions? All right, do I hear a motion?
Motion.
I and J?
Motion to approve items 9I and J.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right, that passes.
And I do just want to acknowledge Mike's effort also on the grant for that, on helping out write a substantial amount of that grant language. All right, moving on to the same Bay watershed Narragansett Bay and Watershed Restoration Grant for Indian Run Brook Restoration. So before I begin, I do want to acknowledge the efforts of our staff, including planning, parks, and DPS, because they really laid the groundwork for this grant which was part of what's called the SNEP grant, which Richard referred to earlier, the Southern New England Project. So before this grant came, they had already laid groundwork in looking at Indian Run Brook, the vegetation along the embankment near the Village Green, and the watershed and the runoff from the parking lot from the Guild. There was a project done with Save the Bay and SNEP. They generated documents. There was funding for that through SNEP. They worked all the way to completion on 100% construction documents on that and really teed this up for the grant. So when this particular grant came along, we had a lot to put into the application. So what we're talking about tonight is the potential acceptance of a $66,350 grant for stormwater and riparian buffer improvements at the Neighborhood Guild parking lot. It includes the reconfiguration of the Neighborhood Guild parking area, so the existing pavement would be modified. Some new catch basin sumps would be installed with overflows. That would go down to the brook, but improve water quality to the brook. In addition, there would be a substantial amount of plantings along the embankment, preferably natives, and I believe that was all natives in the planting plan that I saw, to filter the water. There's some swales involved, etc. So this isn't, just to be clear, going to eliminate flooding along that portion, right? We all know the Village Green floods. That is due to a number of other issues, and a lot of it's overflow capacity of the brook itself, and then also there's some issues with the bridge catching things under it. But this will help improve the water quality of the water runoff going down to the brook. So this would require a 50% match, minimum $66,350. I am throwing up caution that it could exceed that with contingencies. You know, it's been a while since the original estimate was done, so we know that things have gone up. So just so the council in full clarity knows that the cost could go up a bit on this project, but again, we do think it's a worthy endeavor. So just so the council understands and the community understands, I know this is a little difficult to see, but on the lower side of the image is the Neighborhood Guild. You can see the parking towards the center. All of that yellow is planting along Indian Run Brook with some trees along the tennis courts. And then what you don't see is some of the modifications made to the parking lot to the north here that would be, you know, kind of cut and modified to accommodate the water quality swales. So, and as I said, these have 100% construction documents. We could move to RFP very quickly. And you can see an image of one of the documents here as part of the construction plan set. And with that, I'll entertain any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Luke on this?
I just have a general comment. As part of all of the work that's going to happen in that area that we've talked about at recent meetings with the work that's being done to the Peacedale Library and other things, I think that this will be a really nice addition to our whole area down there. So it sounds like a great idea. And I'm really happy about the grants, too.
So I have a question about, are you done, Patty?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So, Luke, these memos, you reference the grant match reserve fund has money in it, and that's what you're tapping for the hydrilla and this. It's just not a bunch of words that I've heard put together in that way, and I don't know where we allocate funding for that, because I don't recall it in like a CIP or a budget discussion. So did I miss something, or?
Sure, that's a good question. So the straight answer is, if you remember, and I'll defer to Brian on this, but I think it was last year, the year before, we had end-of-year funds. And one of the recommendation, knowing that we had ARPA and we had a bunch of grants that we were going for, was to take $1 million of that and separate it for grant matching, for exactly this, because we knew a lot of these grants were going to require matches. So this was really what it was for, to leverage these funds and make sure that we can move forward these types of projects and have some flexibility. Now, I can't say that we may not find other reserves that are already slated for the Guild that we might be able to tap, but this fund exists surely for this effort, for matching funds. So I don't know, Brian, did I do a good job? If you want to add anything?
Was that not this spring's budget, the one before, Jim? Was it? It's not this.
He's coming up now. He'll clarify.
That was approved as part of the year-end transfers for fiscal year '23.
Right.
Yes.
So not this April, June?
Correct,
It was the
prior.
previous year?
Yes.
Okay. So we put $1 million aside and we're obviously.
What's the balance now, Brian?
Yep, there you go, Brian.
I don't think if we've used any, it's been very little. I could get a number for that tomorrow, but if we've used any, it's been very little. There's effectively, if not $1 million, very close to $1 million left.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Greg?
In this project, is the brook going to be cleaned up? Get rid of that mess that's actually in the brook?
You know, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm sorry. I can get you an answer on that. I don't know if they're gonna, so you're talking trash or you're talking dredging or something in between? Dredging? I don't think dredging was part of the project. It was mostly on the embankments and the parking lot itself and the addition of swales along the embankments. There was no dredging involved.
And so you say it's ready to go to RFP. So when would we see this work underway? The parking lot, the
So
water?
the general plan at the moment, we have several improvements, to Councilwoman Alley's point, going on in the area, and we have KCM managing that, where obviously our staff is pretty tasked out right now with all these projects, is maybe leaning a little bit on KCM for short money to help us manage and get this out to RFP and see it through, so we don't delay the process. That's a thought. But my anticipation is to get it out so we could plant and build it in the spring would be ideal if we can get it out with an RFP. Because there's no reason we can't. We have the construction documentation to put an RFP together. We could get it out during ideal bid season, which is coming up. When contractors are somewhat idle, we might get better pricing and have it teed up for the spring so that way by summer we might have a finished project.
Okay.
And that dovetails with the neighborhood guild improvements that we're doing on the inside of the building.
Right. I don't know if I heard you correctly. You're hiring someone or
No, we already have, so KCM Project Management is managing 3 projects, the Community Learning Center, the Neighborhood Guild, and the EMS station in Perryville, which are doing an excellent job so far. They've hit the ground running, they're keeping those projects on track, and they're pushing them hard. In knowing that and making sure that these projects get done with the limited bandwidth we have, it's a discussion I need to have with the manager, is whether we would want to engage them, given our ability to move this project forward, or do we just hit the pause button a little bit and wait till staff frees up to be able to tackle it? So that's something we'd have to gauge.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Luke?
In your presentation, you mentioned, and I get that this is about stormwater and riparian buffer around Indian Run itself, that strip. But you also mentioned it's not about the flooding that goes on in the common area itself. Is there any long-term plan by the town to address that?
So I'll defer to the DPS director on that. I will say that we've had discussions and we've looked at trying to leverage grants, including the grant that we received from the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank, to eventually create a plan of the entire Saugatucket. But Rich?
So we did receive some funding for some design work at the Saugatucket culvert on Saugatucket Road. It's where the S-curve is, to widen and raise that road because of just such routine flooding. As a component of that, it will involve some watershed study, because when you make changes like that to what is an impoundment, you are affecting upstream, downstream effects. And I believe what you're doing is you're changing the time of concentration. So I think that maybe from that, what we'll see is further study of other areas in the watershed to try to get everything so that it's, so that you do affect time of concentration, but positively, so that you don't have all of the water rushing through those areas at one time. This project does not address dredging or anything like that, but what it does address is the environmental part of water quality.
The area around.
In and around, so all those grass areas that go right down to the water, much of it will be planted so that you can still access the water similarly, but not mowing right down to the water. We're just trying to restore a vegetative edge, and then the parking lot will receive some water quality.
So the reason I'm asking is, if there is a long-term plan to address that other flooding, is there any chance that this project that you're working on may limit your abilities to deal with that? Do you think that other project would involve adding to the water flow with Indian Run that this may be affected by?
I do not think that this project affects those issues at all, negatively, or, it actually probably does affect positively, because we are providing some volume storage above those flood areas. So the parking lot will receive some storage, minimal amounts, because there's not a lot of land there. I think a long-term study to look at some of these impoundments is necessary, and that'll happen. It's going to take some time, but I really want to see what comes out of this Saugatucket. The design work on that's going to really help us understand, at least from the Saugatucket, even to the dam in Peacedale, I would say all the way up to, was it the Indian Run Village, or was it Indian Lake Village or something? I think we'll look at all of that, at least a good portion of that. So I think it's going to be interesting to me. It'll be interesting to see what those numbers show as a flood study for that area, and then I think we're going to end up having to apply it everywhere, because this is just getting too regular. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Rich. All right, any other questions for Luke? Do I hear a motion on this item?
Motion to approve item 9K.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes. All right, we got one more from you, Luke.
And I want to be clear on this memo. I speak as I respectfully request. I'm requesting this on behalf of the school building committee, just so I'm clear. So I realize at the beginning of the memo I say I, but on the resolution I say on behalf of the school building committee. So I just want to be clear on that. So just for background, Robert Littlefield, he served as the interim superintendent, as we all know, from 2023 through June 2024. A new superintendent, Michael Petraza, has taken over as the permanent superintendent of the schools. But during the time that he did serve as superintendent, Robert Littlefield served on the school building committee in his ex officio capacity, meaning that by ride regulation, that spot for superintendent is required on the building committee. So as soon as he took the helm as superintendent, he was automatically appointed to the building committee. He served in that capacity. The committee felt in total that he did an honorable job. He helped shepherd the stage 2. He also communicated with the public, and again, I'm just expressing what the committee has said in the latest meeting. And they felt that he was a good add to the committee. In discussing that, the committee had decided to take up the prospect of appointing Robert Littlefield to the committee as a community member, as an electorate. They felt that he might be a good add. They also discussed the fact that the odd voting members, as it sits now, we know that there's been past discussions about not making it even. So the proposal was to take Brian Sylvia's position as finance director, essentially making him a non-voting member, and then make Robert Littlefield a voting member. So to keep the voting membership at 9, but keep Brian on the committee, because he obviously serves a resource as the finance director, and this is becoming a big finance project. So the request by the committee, which was voted on the 11th, I believe, was to appoint, if the council should so choose, appoint Robert Littlefield to the building committee as a voting member, and then affirm that Brian would be put down as a non-voting member of the committee. I also did include in here, because we have had some shifts on the committee, just to affirm everyone on the list who's on the committee. I put a table as part of the resolution. And I'll entertain any questions.
All right, thank you, Luke. Any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, so normally the process would be a little different. So I'm just concerned that we've created a new process while we're re-engineering the committee makeup. Normally it would be presented not as a new business item, it would be a discussion item, and then we would vote on it. It's already advanced into new business. So I just feel like if the committee wanted to add membership, they could come to the council and we would entertain that. We actually had someone request from the town council. It's kind of that the town council member wanted to be on it. We had a big conversation. People here said they didn't want to add anybody. They liked the way it was and didn't want to change the makeup at all. I have respect for Bob Littlefield. This isn't about Bob Littlefield. He will be a great contributor in any way. I have concerns, as I think we all should, that we're removing the finance director as a voting member of the committee. I'm happy to add Bob, but I do not want to remove Brian as a voting member. And I would move that we appoint Bob Littlefield and retain Brian Sylvia. That's my motion on this.
Okay.
One thing that I have heard discussed and that I like about having Bob Littlefield on the committee is that he's a member of the South Kingstown community, whereas, to have Brian, I'm not sure that Brian is a resident of South Kingstown, so to me, it makes more sense to have somebody who is a resident of the town, like Bob Littlefield, voting rather than Brian, who is our finance director. And I do like it being kept as an odd number. I just think that makes sense. So that's just one thing that I've seen often discussed, that some folks have a hard time accepting voting members that are not actually residents.
So I will not vote to remove the town finance director from the committee. You can if you choose to.
Well, I don't think we're talking about removing him, we're just talking about the voting, correct?
Right.
Is that
so you're
what
going
was?
to remove I would really, truly think hard as we go into a $150 million bond project that you as town council members are going to remove the finance director from having a vote. I would challenge you back to look at the votes. I don't anticipate any vote even getting to 5-5. We wouldn't want that. We would all say, if you're having such contention that you're at 5-5 or 6-4, we would want to put the brakes on. We would want to know what was going on and come to a better decision. I don't have any issue with Bob Littlefield joining. I have concerns about removing Brian's voting status. So I would hope that there would be a second to at least have people vote up or down on whether or not Brian can stay and Bob could join. Is there a second here?
I would second.
Thank you.
All right, we got a motion, a second, discussion. I got some questions. Legal counsel, RIDE regulations require that we have a local budget official on the school building committee. It allows us, we have the authority to make that person a non-voting member? We do. That's a question.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So can you just give us a general briefing as to what are the requirements here? Obviously, I assume that we are in compliance now based on the current makeup. And it is your opinion that the suggested change or the change requested by the school building committee would keep us in compliance?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Brian Sylvia, come on up here.
Good evening.
You are okay with losing your voting rights on this group?
I'm happy to serve in any capacity. I'm very much invested in this town and this project, and I will be at every meeting, regardless of voting or not. I will be there.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm just trying to formulate. I just would like to know, primarily, well, I guess one good question would be regarding the votes, how they've come down. Are they usually, is there often, do we?
That's a good question. Luke Murray, can you give us?
I can answer that.
Okay.
Almost everyone, I've been on there 2.5 years, it's been unanimous. We don't dissent, we will talk it through, but it's never come down to, even close to a 4-5 or a 5-5. So it's a moot issue, really.
And I'm fine with,
Luke, can you just give a little bit more explanation for the benefit of the public why the school building committee wanted to essentially do the trade-off of voting members?
So I think the rationale was that keeping an odd number, we know it was discussed at length by the council previously, so I think the idea being that, in the interest of keeping the same dynamic, but I will say this, it's the council's call, right? And it really is a discussion among your body to determine, we don't control the council controls our fate as the building committee.
It was obvious the town council wanted to keep it in previous discussions to a max of 9 for that odd number, and keep it small, now Bob Littlefield would be a great addition to that, he really would, because his institutional knowledge has been involved in the system for over 40 years, so I would encourage him to come on. But Brian has been integral in all of this. Every financial decision, we run it by Brian, he researches it, and he gives us very accurate information. Quite honestly, 9, 10, we're not going to have an issue either way. I like Brian on the committee. If you remember historically, I've been on that committee for well over 2 years now. Brian, we did have the finance director from the school department there, which didn't work out so well. So Brian, whether he's a resident or not, it doesn't matter. He's acting in the best interest of the town.
and nothing against you, Brian, I'm bringing up.
No, it's a valid,
Right.
I mean, we'd all would like to have everyone as a resident, but many of the people on there are not, because the principal of the high school comes from out of state and so forth. My personal opinion, I'd like to have all of them on as voting members. I don't think we'll ever have a problem. We've all been working well together. I don't think we'll have a problem of split votes.
That's all I
But
care about.
it was the decision of the council to keep it at 9. That's why we respected your decision.
That was
Well, it was-
that was a
it was-
3-2 vote. There was a desire to add people. That was a 3-2 vote.
But it was still a majority.
I
so-
understand, but it's not the whole council. It was a split decision.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah. Did someone step down?
No.
There have been
No,
people
there
on
was-
and off. There have been people on and off that committee. Like Mark Prince stepped off, Bob Littlefield came on. Bob Littlefield left, Mr. Pedraza came on.
So
Terry-
the new superintendent would have the same input that Mr. Littlefield would have as far as knowing the ins and outs of what the new building should have in it.
He would, but the new superintendent came from out of district, and Mr. Littlefield came from in the district, and then became a superintendent in another district later. I mean, he's been a very valued, trusted resource.
To me, I was voted down to be on it, and one of the reasons was you wanted to keep the number the same, the number of members on the committee. If you're looking to increase it, there are other people. Dorwell certainly has been to as many meetings as, or probably more than what Mr. Littlefield has gone to, been. There are probably other people in town that also have as much knowledge as Mr. Littlefield would have. So if he's going to be added, I think we should put it out there to see if anybody else has the interest to be on it.
All right, you had me moving toward you.
So I want to go back. I want to appeal to your sense of we can compromise, we can bring Littlefield on, because I think that's great. I do sometimes worry we have a new superintendent, an existing a former superintendent. I don't want to step on anyone's toes because Mr. Pedraza is new. But I think Bob is shown to be an honorable and professional leader, and he would be a great addition. I am just not going to vote to remove the finance director. I think that's sort of silly on our part. Like, we don't want to do that. So if we could go to the 10, we could sort of compromise and have a win and move on.
Go ahead.
I agree. I understand what it is that the school committee, a school building committee is proposing, and I've been to a lot of those meetings. Bob's input, not just Bob's input, but Brian's input as well, has been very valuable for the discussion. Whether he's got a vote or not, he's going to continue to put his 2 cents worth in, so to speak. I would say let's just vote to approve the motion.
Let's call the question.
All right, still in discussion. I just do want to state, I want to respond to some of Greg's comments. This is sort of a one and done for me. I do not wish to add more members following this. So if we proceed down the route of adding Bob Littlefield and keeping Brian Sylvia, I do not wish to make any further changes. I think it makes sense, Robert Littlefield, in this context. He's served as interim superintendent for the last year. He's very familiar with the makeup of the project. He understands it deeply, and he can help the group move forward in light of its new appointee, the current superintendent of the school. So I think this makes sense. I'm a little weary about the 10-person makeup of the committee, but since they generally vote unanimously, I'm okay with it. But I'd rather not open this up for add another member. I think considering this context, who we're looking at, I think it makes sense. I'm okay with having 10 voting members, but I do not wish to open it up to add another member down the road. Go ahead.
Well, that's fine, but it's only as good as this council is, because the council at any time could change that. So
That's right.
I don't know what the word is in law, the hand from the grave thing. You can't make a law, to the future. We can agree now, but in 10 weeks, it could be a different council who could say, we're going to add a council member.
That's correct.
It's highly unusual not
Just
to have
expressing my
I
intent
know,
and my thoughts.
but it's highly unusual for any school building committee to not have anyone on the town council on it. If you do your research.
Well, this is the first one that's been successful so far that we've seen, has not had a town council member on it.
Other communities, Rory, we are unlike any other community to not have a town council member. But I'm just going to, let's just move this forward, because I want to move Bob on and keep Brian. And if you're all in agreement, can we please vote?
All right, any more discussion?
I just want to say that up until very recently, we were paying Mr. Littlefield really good money to advise us, and now he wants to sit on this council, on this school building committee, and do it as a service. So I am in favor of appointing him. So yes, let's vote.
Just one quick thing. Are you guys not moving forward very well with the project?
No, not at all. I mean, we're moving forward. I think we've been highly successful, and we all, so I don't, no, I would not agree. I've been on many committees.
No,
my
I'm not
40-year
saying
career.
you are. I'm just
No,
asking.
I'm just
as-
saying, and I think this committee, we don't agree on everything all the time. We work it out, we hash it out, we take a vote, but I think this committee has been very successful in moving this project forward and making very important decisions.
Then to put him on because you're going to have him move the project forward doesn't make any sense then.
Well, he was part of the, he was part of moving it forward the past year, so it's.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed?
Nay.
That passes 4-1. Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Brian. It's going to bring us to item M. Lori Fox, come on up.
Good evening, thank you. The item I have before you is to extend the backup and disaster recovery contract that we have with our current vendor, ThinkGuard. We started it in 2020 when we moved to Office 365, and then we added police data, and now I'm looking to add the town's on-premise data as well as our server backups. This would allow IT to better restore data. It would all be in one location, and it gives us the affordability of having a single pane of glass looking at our backups. And there is money in my operating account that was approved as part of the '24 budget.
All right, thank you, Lori. Any questions? Do I hear a motion?
To approve item 9M.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes. Thank you, Lori. It's going to move us now to the town manager's report.
There are 4 items under the town manager's report. 2 I will do A and B. Jamie Rabbit will go over C and D. We'll try and keep it as brief as we can. So every meeting we give it just an update on the school building project. We've talked about it at length. I just have a couple of things to add moving forward. So the last meeting was Wednesday, September 4th, and there was at the school building committee, and there was approved a request to award geothermal test well in the amount of $97,755 for the possibility of having, geothermal heating in the school. The school committee, it was forwarded to the school committee for approval, and they will be paying that amount of money. That'll come out of their budget. They also discussed at that meeting were RFQs for the environmental engineering services reviewed by Left Field. There were 5 applicants that were submitted. 4 were qualified. The school building committee spoke about it, is going to recommend Ty and Bond for approval, which is the name of the company that they vetted, and we'll be bringing that to the town council with that recommendation for engineering services on September 23rd at the next meeting. Left Field also reviewed how they approach contingencies in the budget process in this process. Once again, it's always emphasized to Left Field that we have $150 million and that's the budget. That's it. So he brought up, what the contingencies that could occur, if they had to value it down or whatever. But that's part of the discussion he had. The next meeting was scheduled to be held on September 19th, but there might be a conflict with the Board and Commissions meeting, so we'll still working this out, but we will post the next date and time for the next meeting. Yes.
So when you're talking about contingencies, we had a price of the high school coming in, I don't know, was it 133, right? It was, right? Am I right? So I'm kind of confused why they would ever have a conversation. There's no going over 150 because we already built a huge contingency from all these meetings where they all patted themselves on the back that they identified that we didn't bid right and blah, 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 blah. So am I wrong? Like, did I, right? We don't need a contingency. We already created that contingency.
Well, I don't think you're wrong, but I mean, that conversation is going to come up throughout the entire project. We're getting bids back on some of the projects we're doing, like the EMS building that came higher than we thought, and, we're talking about
Right.
that. So I think the conversation will be had, but it's clear to Left Field what the project, the budget is, and that it must be kept within that budget. This was just part of the discussion.
Okay. He's not already suggesting that
No.
we're going to go
No.
over and above?
No, it's actually the opposite. They're very in tune with
Okay.
what can be spent and how you could value engineer it down if you need to. And if we're coming in under budget, they've built in many contingencies. If it's coming in under budget, or there are extra funds, we could, I'm not going to say upgrade, but just do some projects that we could possibly have more money to put into.
Okay.
It wasn't a negative conversation.
Okay. And then just to follow up, to make sure that we're going to try to do our best effort to get all the minutes up so that the community can access them?
I agree with your assessment. I agree with Roberta. It's been frustrating. The problem is it's really like an all-volunteer school building committee, and we've been working, trying to dig out of a hole for a while The people that were assigned over a year ago just were not doing the minutes. We've relayed the concerns to the chair, and we're working hard to rectify that. But you are right, the minutes should be up. There's no excuse.
I mean, I didn't hear if Roberta Mulholland checked all the way back, or is this the 13 meetings for 2024, or there are no minutes? I just haven't checked.
What I mean is we've been struggling with this from the inception of the committee, that the minutes weren't going up on time. This is just continuing, but the chair is aware of it. We're working hard to rectify it.
Can one of the young men that are, I know Dennis Haggerty, like we have some kids that are doing internships here. Is there a way that maybe we could task one of them with that?
I don't know that answer, but it's our responsibility. There's no excuse.
Right,
They
I
should
know,
be
I'm
up.
just trying to...
Right? I'm not
I
going
just
to
want
offer
to
any
answer
excuses.
Deb.
Thank you.
I have been following the minutes from the beginning, and it is not just this year. It goes all the way back to the beginning of 22.
It does.
23. I mean, when it became,
It's been a struggle from day
September,
one.
And then 23, the spring meeting minutes weren't filed until very late in the fall and in December. So it's not just the current. And I was going to use this during public comment, but isn't there a staff person that we could assign? Because I can't imagine any other committee having to do that.
Exactly. I was going to say, every committee is volunteers, and we have a staff liaison, and I don't know how to make it happen, but we need to make it happen.
Well, I'm not going to sit here and offer any excuses. It happened,
Okay.
and there's no excuse that I can offer to make it any better, except that it's frustrating for us as well. Now, going back in time, the people that were assigned from the inception of the committee didn't do the job.
Right.
And
So
I don't know
this
what
is
else to say.
a question for Amy. Is there a penalty for not providing and posting the minutes to a meeting?
Well, if a committee is subject to the Open Meetings Act, which the school building committee is, there would be a penalty if someone filed a complaint.
So potentially every violation, every meeting that the minutes aren't filed is an individual violation?
What would likely happen, based on my experience with how the Attorney General's office handles these complaints, is if there hasn't been a record of a previous violation of this type by the school building committee, meaning, years ago, and of course, the school building committee is the school building committee of this era, right? What would likely happen is, I'm going to assume that the people in this room are going to make sure those minutes are filed, this week. So let's say if somebody filed a complaint tomorrow, the Attorney General would likely say, well, hey, even though the minutes were filed late, have they been filed now? Have they been made available to anyone who have requested them? And then a warning letter would be issued.
Okay.
So that's just my best guess of what would happen.
All right, let's take best efforts to assure that all minutes are filed and we're in compliance, such that if any complaints were filed, we wouldn't have any legal liability here or civil penalties.
We're doing our best to get it done as soon as we can.
All right.
I have a question. On the $100,000 for drilling the test hole?
Yes.
Why isn't that coming under the $150 million contract? The school should not have to be paying for that. It shouldn't come out of their budget.
Well, they offered, and that's the way it stood.
So it kind of goes hand in hand with what I've been saying right along. They have a lot more money than they should.
All right. Next item.
Next item is American Rescue Plan Act funds. So as we historically, let's look back, the past 3 years ago, the town, like every other town or city in the United States, received a portion money based on population and so forth for rescue plan money. This town was fortunate to receive approximately $9 million. The town council, several councils ago, voted on a plan of action to spend this money moving forward. But there is a deadline that's fast approaching on committing these funds to be spent. And we've been really watching that because we do not want to have to give any money back. So we will have to make an adjustment that we're going to bring before the council on the 23rd of September with recommendations on, because some of the projects that were designated are moving at molasses pace, and we're not going to meet the deadline. So rather than wait till the last minute and be in panic mode, we're going to come to you months earlier saying this allocation here, the timing's not going to work. These are the recommendations we have to fund other much-needed projects. So we're working on that now. All the directors have submitted what their capital plans were. We're itemizing them. We're looking at and prioritizing which ones would need the most funds as soon as we can get them. And we have two pretty big projects, infrastructure projects, we really need to get done in the town. But I don't want to give too much information because we're still looking at it and prioritizing it. But just to make you aware, we're on it, we're looking at it, and the 23rd of September is when we'll bring to the council what the recommendations would be. Then the council can take action if so needed.
Thank you, Jim. Go ahead.
So a couple of meetings ago, I can't remember because we didn't have one in August, but either the August or the July, we had a conversation about the architectural grants for Main Street and Peacedale, and we set those areas. That's it, facade program. Couldn't think of the words. So where are we at with that? Because we did allocate about $1 million for that.
Yeah, so the facade, I'm happy to tell you the facade program is moving forward. And we have, and Jamie will talk, they put a tremendous amount of work in it. I think there were 14 projects that was submitted. That is not one we're concerned about.
Okay.
There's another bigger one that I think we partnered with other state agencies in trying to leverage the money on a state road.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one that has really bogged us down.
Yep.
It's not the facade program.
I appreciate that you're going to try to streamline the projects, one, because the staff has lots of things. If you even listen in this meeting, the staff is dealing with a lot of different projects. I think in 2020, or when we were voting on that, there's only 2 of us here that were actually part of that. That was a very ambitious, very long list. And I think it would have been hindsight going forward, not that we ever want to have a pandemic again, but if we were to have that, it would be easier to make it very simple and have 1 or 2 projects and be done, rather than hire a consultant, do this little thing over here, because it's much more chaotic, and now we're at this point of we're actually going back to keep it simple. So just for everyone's sake, having served and voted on 27,000 projects, it felt like.
Well, hindsight is always 20/20. We can't really go back and change.
I know.
We do the best we can with what we have to work with.
I think the simplification makes a lot of sense, and reducing the projects and advancing the smaller ones.
We have several very good projects that need to be done. We will need additional funds.
Yep.
We'll bring it to the council to make those, since you made the decision on how to spend the money, you need to make the decision on how to amend the money that's going.
Coming in with recommendations on the 23rd, how much time does the town have?
About 3 months to make the decision, but we've already worked that out as well. We need to be committed to the projects. These projects, we are already committed in many ways, so I think it would be a pretty easy transition to transfer that money to a different spot.
All right, thank you, Jim.
There are 2 more items on here. One is Old Tower Hill Road Neighborhood Plan, and the other is the Facade Improvement Plan, which is, Debbie brought that up, Councilmember Bergner, so I'll turn it over to Jamie and he can go over those.
Thank you, Mr. Manny. First update is regarding Old Tower Hill Road. We have transitioned from Dover and Cole to Able City East. We have both Jason and Pam on board at Able City East. We do have a 135-page draft document summarizing the steps that we're taking in the spring into the summer, and staff is reviewing that. We will have draft comments that go back to Able City East this week, and they will make some revisions internally based on that draft. They will then submit the draft to other stakeholders for review and comment on. We'll go over the stakeholders that will be identified in consultation with the town manager's office. But again, in likelihood, it'll be EDC, Planning Board as two of the primary stakeholders, and then we'll look at representatives from the business community. We were also working on a commitment with Able City East to be in town for your October 28th council meeting. I should have confirmation from Able City East representatives that they would be able to come in for that meeting and go over the document, that 135-page document with town council, so that you'll be able to ask and have questions answered based on their presentation. They will also discuss next steps on the 28th with council, if we can work on that. We do have 2 backup dates in your November council meetings. With regards to the facade improvement program that Mr. Manny alluded to and Ms. Bergner had questions on.
Oh, Jamie, can we stop at C before we move on to that?
Sure.
Any questions here? I got a few questions for you.
Okay.
All right, so we've received a 135-page document. Your office, your department is in the process of making comments to it?
Correct.
And sending it back to Able East. Then from there, Able East will take a review, and then there'll be stakeholders
So-
will give comment. Go ahead,
I'll
clarify
back
this
up.
for me.
So we have an internal draft. We want to make that draft as complete as possible before we release that to the public for comment. So we're working through that internally, which we will hand that document with comments over to Able City this week. They will make further revisions to the initial draft, then a draft report, we'll say the second version of the draft, will be released for public review to stakeholders.
And that will take, where do we expect that? So this week you send comments back, they get a draft?
The comments should be turned around in a week.
Okay.
So again,
okay.
we're anticipating 2 weeks to 3 weeks ahead of your council meeting in October for comment and review.
Okay. And then EDC and Planning Board? How much
EDC
time
and
will they
Planning
take?
Board at a minimum. They should have 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
Could we have it at the same time that you're handing it to the planning board and the
If
EDC?
council would like it when it's handed to the other
Yeah.
stakeholders, we can do that also.
There's no way that we can read a 135-page document in 3 days' time.
It is, again, there are a lot of correlations to other staff reports and other reports that have been done, and we're making sure that every reference to another report is legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
Those reports have value.
Mhm.
There are some references to a report that was only done in draft that were supplemented with other data. So again, there's a lot of interrelationships contained within the document. And again, we're trying to dot our I's and cross our T's
Mhm.
before the general public get a look at it.
And so then when you hand it to, when it goes to the general public, how will they find it? Is there like a webpage on Old Tower Hill Road?
We have a webpage on Old Tower Hill Road, and we'll be supplementing that.
Great. So that's would go well there, and a news flash and all that kind of promotional things?
Yes.
Thank you.
And Jamie, what town council meeting do we anticipate the consulting firm will be here to review the 135-page document with us?
I discussed that with the town manager, and we were looking at October 28th. That's your second meeting in October.
And then what happens next after that?
They would then take comments and questions that council has, refine that draft, and then there's a subsequent report to that. So this is what's called the neighborhood plan. So this is the primary report associated with the improvements proposed and a path for regulatory changes. The final step is a draft of regulatory changes.
So how soon after October 28 do we expect the draft of regulatory changes?
I will get you that answer. I do not have that answer tonight.
Doesn't that have to go to the planning, but the process would be, it would go to the planning board?
Again, it's so planning board is part of the stakeholder input. Ultimately, any proposed revisions, and again, we're getting those not in a final stage, we're getting those as draft recommendations, will have to be vetted, and we also have a second phase to that if the council feels or planning board feels that draft needs to be more in-depth. We have resources in this fiscal budget to potentially amend the contract and extend it to a more in-depth preparation for regulatory changes. And again, legal needs to look at that also.
Jamie, do you expect that the newly elected town council in a few months, at some point in that 2-year term, they'll be able to enact those regulatory changes?
I would very much hope so, within less than 2 years. But
Okay.
again, a lot of it is contingent upon feedback from the community and the planning board and ultimately action by the town council.
All right, I just want to express, this is a important topic to us. We want to move this along. We understand, the planning process takes time, but this has taken a very long time, and I had wished it would move it along faster, as you know, because we continue to talk about this at meetings whenever it comes up. I'm looking forward to meeting with a consulting firm at the meeting on the 28th, but I have a real interest, and I think the community does, in making those regulatory changes, putting them into effect, and allowing some change and expansion in the community in this particular area. So I'm not exactly pleased with the pace, but we just got to keep going, and appreciate your work, but our position on this. We'd like to move this along as best we can.
And I think a lot of the discussion when you look at the regulatory fact is going to be whether you aspire to have this type of development or mandate this type of development. And there are two formats to the regulatory process, that you aspire to it or you are going to regulate that if you are redeveloping your existing property or a vacant property, you must adhere to the new design standards, that it's not an option. So again, there'll be a lot of debate and merits to that discussion of which regulatory path you take.
Okay, and a perfect topic for discussion when we have the consultants here with us on that night on the 28th.
Right. I just want to put a more realistic slant on this, that when the consultants were here speaking with us, this could be 10, 15, 20 years before we actually see what some of the visions are, right? We know that some of those property owners, you can tell them that this is mixed use and they can say, I'm all set, I don't want to do that. So we can change the zoning. It doesn't matter if we did it quickly or not. The property owner has to then want to do that, invest in that way. We can want all we want. The owners have to try to change. And it might take subsequent purchases. So it's the right thing to do, but it's not going to be in 2026, we're going to see mixed use all the way up and down Tower Hill Road. But it's the leading, guiding that we want, right, Rory?
No, I understand and I agree,
Okay.
but it's 10 years from the date the regulatory changes are enacted. I mean, we've been working at this for, it seems, a year and a half now.
Yeah, but
So instead of 8.5 years from now, we're not even at the 10 years from now mark yet.
Right, but it's not Jamie's fault, Jamie Rabb. He's been working, and we have asked him to work, and the consultants came through, and the EDC came a year ago, ironically, they're here again tonight, and asked for this to be advanced, and it just takes time, budgeting, consultant, now they've changed firm-ish names, but they're the same players. So, but it would have never, if somebody wanted to build mixed use, it would never preclude them from coming forward and doing a project. But once we make that section zoned for those types of 2-3 stories with apartments and things, it doesn't mean someone's going to build it. It just means it's possible. And so that's great, but the devil is in the actual completion of it could be 15 years before we see it.
Jamie, the regulatory changes that you're talking about, it's essentially writing ordinance, correct?
Correct. It's writing a form-based code, which is slightly different from the traditional Euclidean zoning. which has a different dynamic. And we can go over the difference. Yes.
Different dynamic in the writing?
In the writing, correct.
Okay.
So in a traditional Euclidean, you have a set of uses that then have to adhere to dimensional requirements. In a form-based code, you look more closely at the development form, and there's less emphasis on the uses. All the uses, in essence, are pre-approved, so long as you build your development to inspire and adhere to the form you've pre-approved. So in some of those instances, you're mandating. For instance, you see the pretty renderings where buildings are closer to the street. In some instances, if that's what you want, you're going to have to mandate that and not give an applicant the choice to put their parking lot in front of their building like they would traditionally do under your old code. And that's kind of a philosophical discussion that still needs to occur.
And did I understand you to say that you're looking, or you're going to be looking to extend the contract, increase the amount of the contract for them to write that?
We have funds within the planning department for a more in-depth dive in the discussions that were done at the charrette. Able City, was then still Dover and Cole, mentioned that they will provide a fairly distinct draft for those regulatory changes. We just didn't budget for a final draft within our scope. So again, the draft may get us across the finish line. It may not. I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
But we're structured with those funds within the department.
So we will have you anticipate in the next 30 days, the EDC, the planning board, and the town council will see the draft?
Correct.
And the public will as well?
We'll have access to it. Correct. Once we release it to boards and commissions, it's a public document.
Great. Thank you.
All right, Jamie, we can move to the next one now.
Okay. Sorry. Mr. Manning said I only had a few moments, but sorry, Jim. I was answering questions. So with regards to the facade program, I want to say to this point, it's been successful. We have 22 applications. Applications closed on August 30th, so it was roughly 10 days ago. Our initial batch were 8 applications that were received. Those were pushed out to the review committee. We have all but 2 responses from the review committee. Once we're asking for a deadline of September 16th, so we can make a recommendation, hopefully at your last September meeting, for funding of the initial 8 that came in. Of the 22, you have construction valued at just over $2.2 million of new improvements in your commercial districts. Of the $2.2 million, approximately $1.1 million would be eligible for grant funding. So a good majority of the work that's being proposed amongst the 22 applications is at the 50% match level. So again, your intent was to leverage these funds to get a substantial investment in improving your main streets. And again, you potentially leveraged 1.1 million into 2.3 million. So on the application side, I would say it's successful. We're still reviewing those internally with the committee. And again, we should have a batch in September, perhaps early October, for recommendations. And then the next, 14 would come to you at a later date. Some of them need some work and some discussion with regards to the supplemental information, but again, we will be making recommendations to council. Some of them may be that this warrants funding upon further discussion and investment in the property. So, are there any questions on the facade program?
I have 17. Sorry, Jim. Just kidding. No, thank you, Jamie. You can talk as much as you want. I don't know what he's saying.
Again, for brevity of the time of the evening, you're always here. We try and be brief.
All right. Thank you, Jamie.
There's one item I just want to address at the tail end of this. Tomorrow's a primary. There was a little bit of misinformation on the website today. We had the 2022 primary locations. It's because it was in 2 different spots and one did not get, it was just an oversight. It's not that big a deal. But just to clarify, because I'm sure we don't want people going to the wrong precincts and so forth. So Nicole, just go over the times that they open, the time they'll close, and where they are.
Of course. So voting on primary day begins at 7 a.m. and ends at 8 p.m. For voting district number 1, they will be going to the Community Rec Center in the multipurpose room. For districts 3 and 4, they will be going to the Rec Center in the gymnasium. For District 2, they will be going to Wakefield Elementary School. For districts 5 and 6, they will be going to the South Kingstown High School. Voting districts 7 and 8 will be going to West Kingston Elementary School. Voting district 9 will be going to New Life Assembly. Voting districts 10 will be going to the Matunic Elementary School all-purpose room. And voting district 11 will be going to the Matunic Elementary School cafeteria. The locations that have a couple different districts in them will have a greeter that will let the voter know which room they need to go into.
All right. Thank you, Nicole.
And you had said previously, how many people have already voted?
During the early voting period that ended at 4 p.m. today, we got 1,021 votes.
Will the correct information be on the website as far as voting? I didn't have a chance to write them all down, but...
Yes, so it is on there now. That was corrected earlier today.
Great, thank you.
For anybody who's interested, you can also go to voteri.gov and plug in your address, zip code, and they'll tell you what place to go.
Good luck, Nicole. First time, you're going to be great.
All right. It's going to move us now to public comments, formerly known as comments from interested citizens. At this point, anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on any matter, I invite you to come on up. We just ask that you introduce yourself, and we'll limit you to 5 minutes.
So I'm Mike Cerullo, and I'm from Vail, and I'm on the board of the Indian Lake Hydrilla Response Coalition. I've also got a little experience from your side of the desk, and I want to make this point. I've never experienced something happening as quickly and as immediately as you guys have done in less than a year. This stuff was found last August 9th, I think it was. It's amazing the commitment, amazing the competence of the people I've communicated with, folks like Mike and Luke, of course the Colonel, in responding to this. So commitment, competence, and courage to do it this quickly and to take the risks financially. And we appreciate that. I just want to share that with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill McCusker, Friends of the Saugatucket. Just wanted to support what he just said. Appreciate all the efforts of everyone involved. Now that this is on the way to kind of keep it controlled in Indian Lake, we got to make sure it doesn't continue to spread, because Warden's Pond now has hundreds of acres, or maybe close to that, of it. I witnessed it myself. South Kingstown has 8 invasive plants. Hydrilla's aquatic invasive plants. Hydrilla's far by the worst. But if you want to see what the other ones look like, just go to Main Street. That's all over the impoundment over there by the dock. We have 6 public boat launches. We want to make sure it doesn't continue over there. You've got great efforts with the boat wash and the reader program, but the education and the maintenance of these things are paramount. We got to continue to keep funding them well after this is over, because this could eventually jump back into Indian Lake or any other little pond. I visited all the ponds in South Kingstown and looked around the boat launches. We haven't seen any spread of any hydrilla, which is a really good thing. Let's keep it that way and keep the funding and the support up. And thanks very much.
Thank you, Bill.
Roberta Mulholland. I want to thank you for those housing initiative feasibility public meetings. I went to 2, and I watched the Wakefield Elementary. I streamed it. South Road School was the best public meeting I have been to in this town for years and years. And it's because of that man sitting right there, Jim Manny. He ran a fantastic meeting. More people got to speak than I've ever seen. So if you could do more of those, that would be great. But I had some thoughts about affordable housing. You're talking about, I mean, these are feasibility studies, these are plans you have up there for putting these different housing developments in. But what I've thought about for years, in fact, since 1999, when we introduced Phase 2 zoning, I went to all the meetings in 1998 and 1999, up to the adoption of Phase 2 zoning. In Phase 2 zoning, you outlawed mobile and manufactured homes. And you outlawed, you didn't, you weren't even born probably. Sorry. No more mobile and manufactured home parks, no more mobile and manufactured homes in any district in the town. Mobile homes, manufactured homes, interchangeable, they're affordable. They're built to Boca. They've been built to Boca for years. They are the starter and retirement homes of people all over this country. So one of the things you could do, rather than try to become developers or try to come up with these plans, you could look at the zoning ordinance and reinstitute the ability of people to buy a manufactured home. And you could reinstitute the ability of someone to create a manufactured home park that is not 55 and older, because that's what we have. Right before the Phase 2 zoning in May of 1999, we had the last approved mobile and manufactured home park. That was it. It was about 2 months before. That was the extension, Phase 2 of Tuckertown Village, which is now, I think, Village at Warden's Pond. It was for 285 homes for 55 and older. The application, everything about it was going to be affordable. You should see the prices that they talked about, because the houses back then, mobile homes, manufactured homes, again, interchangeable, were in the $40,000 to $70,000 range. This year, I had the opportunity, this is public, it's on the land evidence records, to be involved in the sale of a manufactured home in Tuckertown Village. That home was over 20 years old. It was bought for around $60,000 20 years ago. It sold for almost $300,000. That is building equity. That is an opportunity that we should not deny people in this town, whether it's for starter, for retirement. But I want to get back to the 285 mobile homes that we were talking about in 1999 and that finally got approved. That's Phase 2 of Tuckertown Village. It's known as South County Country Club. I didn't look at the paper this week, but Saturday before that, one of those homes went for $914,000. That certainly wasn't what anyone was thinking about for mobile home park. There have been some, I think, that have gone for over $1 million. Those were going to be retirement, downsize for people who retired maybe at 55 or maybe at 70, whatever. That's what those were for. What that would do is it opens up the housing stock that's already here for people who've already raised their families to move into something smaller. They could only be 2-bedroom. That didn't happen. And I think that you need to look into it. That's a lot of housing. I don't know how far they're built out, but I just would think that you, as the town council, would look into what happened there. Maybe it's all fine. I just find the fact that 285 affordable houses, they're not affordable. Maybe to somebody from out of state. So address the mobile homes, mobile and manufactured. And also, I was watching the planning board, and the Johnny Cake Realty Corporation is building a house on Green Street. And unbelievably to me, there was no restriction. There was no deed restriction that was going with this new home to be built by the Johnny Cake Center, hopefully for affordable housing. The reason given by the executive director was, well, you know, that would devalue the property. You know, I think if we are giving, again, that's a tax-exempt organization. You know, they recently got that in the last session. That property is not on the tax roll, and there's no deed restriction for affordable. That's great. We hope that they make it affordable, but if it gets sold, there's no deed restriction. I think that we should be asking the Johnny Cake to make those kind of restrictions. That's what we're asking for developers to do. That's a development. That's a developer. I also think that when it comes to Wakefield Elementary,
Roberta, you are a little bit over.
I know, is
Giving
there
you
a
some
long
rope.
line? I waited. Another pet peeve, public comment shouldn't come at the very end of the meeting. I can barely stay awake. When you look at Wakefield Elementary, you have two pieces of property the town owns on Saugatucket River. One is covered with asphalt and it's parking that we desperately need for Main Street. The other is Saugatucket Park and the Wakefield Elementary. Please think about preserving that, because with the kind of changes you have made over the last few years, Wakefield and Peacedale proper are going to become more dense. That's what you've done with infill. I don't know that everybody knows this, but it's going to be more and more dense. And we only have so much green space here. We have a lot out in Matunic. It's great, but nobody can afford to move out there. These people here are going to need that green space, and not with a baseball field, just a nice green space on the river. Don't increase the surface water runoff. Let's think about the river. I loved hearing all the environmental stuff you're doing to protect our town and our environment. Thank you for that. But I do hope you look at that mobile home zoning ordinance, and let's get that here.
Thank you, Roberta.
Before we move on to another person, could we just follow up on that about the manufactured home piece? I actually know two people that built manufactured homes since 1999. So is it an ordinance that we can't build manufactured homes in South Kingstown?
There were amendments to the general laws on this topic recently. If you want to make a motion, direct planning staff and legal to look into this. As you know, we're preparing zoning ordinance amendments to reflect this year's new laws. So you'll have an answer to that soon, and you will also be seeing zoning ordinance amendments for a public hearing. At this point, I'm guessing probably sometime in November, December.
How does...
Okay, sorry, I have some...
Just go nice and slow. So do I need to do the staff, or are you gonna just?
Will analysis of that already be included in the work
Yeah,
that you're
thank
doing?
you.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
so we don't need to direct stuff.
So that was that thing, and then I lost my train of thought about, I'm gonna come back to what you said, Roberta, about the Johnny Cake. That is a concern to me. Is there anything that we can do? Because I think if they're gonna build a home and rent it, what's the issue about putting the deed restriction in so that it's affordable forever? What is that all about?
Maybe we should definitely ask.
So how do we proceed?
I wasn't at that meeting, and I don't know if the planning director was, but we do have an inclusionary zoning ordinance requirement where if you're building above if you're creating a certain number of dwelling units, a portion of the new dwelling units have to be deed restricted as affordable. If this was just one dwelling unit, that requirement wouldn't have applied.
So again, the planning board received an application to do a tear down and rebuild of an existing unit. It was 4 units proposed. It does not qualify for the incentive housing criteria, which is 6 or more. Therefore, there was no component associated with the requirement to do deed restricted affordable since it was under 6. Johnny Cake did explain to the planning board of their intention to continue to rent those on the affordable side because that is the business they are in. But to everyone's point this evening, that is not deed restricted affordable.
The other way to ask the question is, does the planning board have any jurisdiction to require it? Thanks.
No. We can ask, but we have no regulatory authority to require.
So has that decision been made?
Correct.
So we have...
That was approved as a 4-plex.
Okay, I understand that part. So we do have a relationship with Kate Brewster. She comes in all the time for different things and lots of grants. Who would be the best person to discuss adding a deed restriction to that property?
I think we should think this through. We're not really in the business of compelling that not-for-profit organization to deed restrict their property, real estate that they own, to be affordable. I don't think we're in a position to try to compel them to do that. They own it. Their purpose is to help those who are in poverty or need affordable housing, and they're using that property to rent it to those at an affordable rate.
But right now, they're in the business of creating some housing and providing housing to people in the community.
Including through rent?
Correct. But 10 years ago, or not even, the Johnny Cake wasn't in the housing business as they had a thrift store, they had this, they had that. They took over properties from the Welcome House, remember?
Yep.
So they've recently entered the housing pieces. So she could then, the nonprofit could evolve, and then it is an asset, and that is sold. In 15 years, the Johnny Cake could be like, we're not doing that anymore, and now we're going to sell that. And we've just lost the housing for affordable people.
Well, I think if they're going to
housing.
build housing for the purpose of ownership, it should be deed restricted. If it's housing that they're owning and renting, and they're renting it at an affordable rate, it doesn't necessarily have to be deed restricted. They're holding on to an asset. They have a certain purpose. They're not for profit organization. If they wish to appreciate an asset and then dispose of it, use the proceeds to further advance their mission, I mean, I think we're not in a position to compel them to deed restrict the homes that they own that they are renting.
Did we use grant money? Did we give them grant money for this project? I believe we did. Jamie, where'd you go? I know they came with one project. I don't know if it was Green Street or another one.
Again, to answer that question, if I may, Council Chair, definitively, I'm not going to make this statement 100%, but the funding they received were for 2 structures on Kersey Road, not Green Ave. And one point I'd like to make is they got no favorable regulatory decisions associated with their project because they weren't affordable or weren't market rate. They went through the same development process that anyone would go through. So there's no preferential treatment because they were the Johnny Cake Center, potentially bringing to market more affordable units. They were treated the same on the regulatory facets for this type of development. But again, specifically, I can double check, but I'm pretty sure that this project that Mrs. Mulholland was referring to did not receive any grant funding.
Didn't get any funding from the town?
I'm relatively confident that they did not, but I will verify that for you.
Are you going to speak again? Because I'm feeling like I want a motion to add this topic to the agenda because I feel like we've gone. I've said something, Rory said something, Patty wants to say.
Make the motion.
Motion to add to the agenda.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, it's added. So let me add a perspective here. I think that Johnny Cake Center is getting involved in providing affordable housing through affordable rents. They can also provide housing through facilitating affordable home ownership. As far as that route, facilitating home ownership, it should be deed restricted affordable. As to those that it owns and rents out at an affordable rate, I don't believe it necessarily needs to be deed restricted affordable. And I say that because if you force them to do that, it disincentivizes them to invest in real property, and it allows them to less of an ability to own more homes and provide rent at an affordable rate. Do you see where I'm coming from here?
No.
No?
Nope. I don't see the disincentivize. Try.
So, what?
I do understand the logic of what you're saying, Rory, regarding the difference between home ownership and the rental apartments. I mean, of course, there's always potential for things to go sideways somewhere in the future. But I don't know if it justifies us compelling them, us deed restricting a rental, but definitely for ownership.
How about, since we've added this to the agenda, we direct the town manager to have a conversation with the Johnny Cake to figure out really what is going to happen there. Because I don't want to be responsible for it to go sideways. Putting a deed restriction sort of makes logical sense. I understand they don't have to. They may come and say, we intend to rent this at an affordable rate for the next 30 years.
They may have. We're not the planning board.
I don't think this warrants intervention from the town to figure out what's going on. They're a not-for-profit organization. We work with them at times. We give them funding at times. We did not give them funding with respect to this particular project. I don't think we should intervene here to find out more. It's not up to us to decide whether they deed restrict it or not.
You don't want the town manager to ask a question about if the rents will be affordable?
We know the rents are going to be affordable.
So you don't want them to have a conversation with the town staff?
To achieve what?
To have a better understanding of the project?
Jamie, do we have a good understanding of the project? They went before the planning board. They presented a whole...
Again, during the permitting process, they did opine on the fact that they were in the business of bringing affordable units to the marketplace, and that was the intent with this property. However, they did not, in the near term, plan on doing a deed restriction, because that affects the overall value of the property. I can only opine on why they wouldn't do that, but if they needed to leverage that property for a loan financially, they need to get the maximum value for that property if they were ever going to mortgage that for development purposes or even to fund another project. If it is deed restricted, the value is less. But again, I don't know that for a fact of why they made that decision. They only advised the planning board that they had no intention at this time to record a deed restriction. But their intent was to put units in an affordable manner into the marketplace because that's the business they're in.
All right. Thank you, Jamie.
I'd like to just address the manufactured housing piece. And just regarding zoning, I had a conversation with the director of Habitat for Humanity this past week, and regarding some of the work that they're doing in Westerly with putting in a 23-unit all-affordable subdivision. But beyond that, they shared that some of the future plans for Habitat include getting into the ADU market, and that they believe that ADUs would be an ideal product to be manufactured, possibly even here locally. What they're talking about building ADUs, stick-built, and then moving them into place. And so this is sort of in the discussion process right now with Habitat, but there's a lot of other manufactured or operations that make really awesome manufactured buildings that could be used for ADUs. So if we are thinking about zoning, I really think that would be an ideal place to incorporate some of those inexpensive units. So that's really all I wanted to say.
All right. So we are still in public comment. Jim, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. A few takeaways I have from the three housing meetings that we've had. I couldn't get to South Road, but I had a chance to talk with a lot of folks. And these are my personal takeaways here, just the huge amount of infrastructure costs there are going to require a lot more of the the market rate sales, just to make up for those differentials. Also, too, a lot of neighborhood concerns there. Wakefield Elementary, I had an office in town here for 30 years. I personally would like to see condominiums where that school is right now. I'd like to see a lot of year-round condominium owners, which you cannot dictate, but Wakefield needs to have a life in the wintertime, too, with a better business mix, not just the ice cream for summer and the newspapers and coffee shops, but we need clothing and crafts and really a lot more of our products to be offered in town, and especially wintertime. I don't know if any of you didn't have offices there. I did. It gets very lonesome from October to May. So we could really use that and a good tax base by putting condominiums in there. Now, a lot of people also talked about, at that meeting, about possible incubator with small business folks who can't find properties to rent for, some incubator ideas that might hopefully become bigger and larger and better. So that was another idea that came out of Wakefield Elementary. As for Oliver Watson, it was actually a great meeting because at the end of the meeting, one of the economic members, committee members mentioned, give us some absolute, take us 60, 80, 100%, give us some factual situations where the building cost was like $300,000, but at 50%, it was offered at $150,000 to someone. How do you make up that difference? And that's where the Habitat people came into play. They talked about some of the units they've built at that level, 1,500 square feet, $300,000 plus, but they found clients to buy it at 50, 60, 70, 80% of the rates here that we're looking at. How do you make up that difference? And the most important thing there is going back to manufactured homes and modular homes. Those places, when they're put together and built, are beautiful, strong, sturdy. They can be clapboard, they can be shingle, you can do all kinds of projects there. But our current zoning does not allow those in certain districts, and I can understand that, but we have what we're looking at now at town properties. Why in the world couldn't we keep those costs down? Not only for the buyer, but for folks like the Habitat who can build them a little bit cheaper. We don't have to look at what was presented to us by the group up there, these beautiful cottages and everything else stick-built. What's wrong with modular? What's wrong with prefab manufactured homes? And believe me, they're top-notch in today's market. As Roberta mentioned, Boca, and they've got to be, they don't get out of a factory without a red tag. And just one other comments here, after looking at, Oliver Watson, I'm kind of a history nut, so I'd hate to see it just have 20 places in there, but we'll have to see what happens. South Road, Wakefield Elementary. But it all comes back to what I've been pleading with this council for years now.
And the most obvious place where some of this new housing should go is in Curtis Corner School. If you're going to take that school down, put aside 3 to 5 acres, try a small neighborhood of 15 to 18 modular home, kind of a neighborhood. You could keep the football stadium there. We don't need a Taj Mahal, Gillette Stadium, $15 million football complex and field we just don't need that. That extra money can go to the other elementary schools and middle school that need some investment.
But Jim, you know I played football.
I know you do. I know you do. I did too, but I sat on the bench, so I had to take up a softer sport. So these things happen. But really, it's, I mean, this is crazy when you think about it. Taking down the high school that could have been used, and I understand all the deed stuff, it could have been used for a lot of affordable housing, or, you know, even low-income housing. Same thing with Curtis Corner, 30 years old. We're going to wind up with a football stadium there and not a nice neighborhood of these possible modular home park. It just doesn't make sense. We're spending all this extra money when we have these things right at our fingertips here. And my last comment, I appreciate what Roberta's brought up tonight, because I really wish I knew a lot of that information from the minutes of meetings over the last few years. It would have been certainly very, very helpful. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Oh, Bob, I'll leave it on.
Thank you again for your comments. Bob Traeger. Anyway, this has been very interesting this last 25 or 30 minutes, let me tell you. I wrote a couple of notes down. They weren't anything special, just what you had up on the screen. The last thing I put down wasn't even mentioned. I just wrote it down, affordable housing. Now, it just came up now, and it interrupted public forum, and you guys get off on it. Well, what does that tell you? It tells you that this is a subject that needs a lot more discussion than it's usually getting. And you're doing it, and it's great that you're doing it, but really what you need to do is not have it at a regular town council meeting. You need to schedule some meetings that the public can come to and hash some of these things out. I get up here, I never know what I'm going to say when I get up here. I have no clue of what I'm going to say. The other people that get up here are very well prepared in most cases and say they know what they want to say and they have an idea that they want to get across. Well, I do have ideas I want to get across, but I don't have the time to do it. I watched a couple of programs just recently. One of them, and I'm going to just say it quickly, how could I accent this? Does anybody think lately of how many nuclear warheads are pointed at us from Russia, and how many we got pointed on the rest of the world? You know that in 25 or 30 minutes, the whole world could be annihilated. We don't think about that too often, Barry. I just happened to listen to a couple of authors on C-SPAN the other night. They both wrote books on it, and that's all I'm going to say about it. Because you don't want to be thinking about that every minute, or you'd be a basket case. But this affordable housing thing, I've been just looking into it myself, because all I have and my kids have is a couple of pieces of property. And I'm planning, because I've got a few dollars now, I might be able to put a couple of affordable housings. One of the things my son has showed me, because he's good with the internet, affordable housing, you get a lot of these companies, when they manufacture these homes, they have to do them to codes. So they try to incorporate all the codes around the country to make sure that they're done properly, insulated, wiring, and all the rest of it. That's all I'm going to say about that. But anyway, it's a subject, and it's a simple thing to say affordable housing, but everybody knows that affordable housing in this area is nearly impossible. And where I spend a little time up in New Hampshire, it's pretty much the same thing. Even up there in the woods. It's not easy. It's not easy. And the commentary, I can't say all the points. I haven't got them all lined up in my mind, but you made many good points, I thought. Many excellent points that need to be thought of, that need to be reacted to. But you can't do it in a meeting like this. This is a subject, you just demonstrated it a few minutes ago. All of a sudden, public comments went by and you guys got into it. You got into it. Because it's a subject needs to, and I don't agree with the idea. I agree with you can't be deeding, controlling deeds and things like that. But I agree with most of what you said about that subject. You know, it's tricky. It's tricky. But we do, it needs addressing. That's all. It just needs addressing. And it needs a kind of addressing that, actually in PBS, they had one guest on talking about what he does. He spends his whole life researching goodness. I guess I don't know how to describe it, but what he said, he's done research, gotten groups that are completely opposed to one another, people talking to one another that are completely opposed. And one of the results of that was that when they asked him, well, how did you feel about this? And almost, he said 100%. 100% of them were very happy that they did it. Now, granted, I've been trying to push this kind of thing. The last 3 or 4 years, I've had a lot of great conversations with people that I don't even know. I don't even know their name. But you know, as I say, if they go over a half an hour with me, that's silver, and it goes to bronze medal. I have them make it up for them. You know, we need more communication between each other. Every individual in this room, everybody in this whole country, everybody in this whole world is a unique person, completely different than everybody else. They have their own mind. Every mind works a little in an acute way. It's very, very strange stuff. You know, and I don't pretend to know anything about it either. I'm no psychiatrist, that's for sure. I probably need one, but that's another story. But you know, anyway, that's it.
Thank you, Bob.
Geez, I'm sorry, I went over a couple of seconds.
Thank you, Bob. All right, that's going to bring us to Communication 12A. We've already dealt with this, so we can maybe entertain a motion to place on file.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right, that passes. There are no appointments tonight, so is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion to adjourn, a second. Any discussion? All in favor?